Police arrested the president of the Brockton East Bridgewater chapters of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club on gun charges, 48-year-old.
Blood on their hands, fear in their wake. These aren't characters from your favorite TV show. They're real outlaws who terrorized America. Ever wonder what makes someone so dangerous that even hardened criminals fear them? From motorcycle club presidents who ordered dozens of hits to fugitives who evaded the FBI for decades, these 10 Outlaws MC members redefined what it means to live outside the law. The stories of their crimes will shock you, but it's how they built their criminal empires that will truly leave you speechless. Number 10. Harry Taco Bowman.
Bowman died on Sunday in federal prison at the age of 69. He was serving a life sentence for murder, firebombings, and racketeering, among other charges.
In the world of outlaw motorcycle clubs, few names have inspired more fear than Harry Joseph Taco Bowman. As the international president of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Bowman didn't just lead one of America's most violent biker gangs. He transformed it into a sophisticated criminal enterprise that stretched across continents. Standing just 5 feet 8 inches with a bushy mustache and often wearing the leather cuts emblazoned with the Outlaw's skull and crossed pistons patch, Bowman didn't look particularly intimidating at first glance. This unassuming appearance was perhaps his first weapon, allowing him to be underestimated by rivals who would soon learn their mistake, often with fatal consequences. Bowman earned his taco nickname from his passionate love of Mexican food, a seemingly innocent detail that belied the calculating brutality with which he expanded the Outlaws' territory and operations. Under his leadership, the club grew from its Detroit roots to establish chapters across the United States and into Canada, Europe, and Australia. This wasn't just a motorcycle club anymore, it was an international criminal organization involved in drug trafficking, weapons dealing, extortion, and murder for hire. FBI agents who tracked the club during this era described the Bowman years as the period when the Outlaws evolved from a troublesome biker gang into a highly structured criminal organization with Bowman at the apex. What truly set Bowman apart from other outlaw leaders was his strategic approach to violence. While some biker bosses earned reputations as hotheads who would explode over minor issues, Bowman used violence like a business tool, deliberately, calculatedly, and always with a clear purpose. If someone crossed the club or violated their rules, Bowman didn't just order a beating or a murder. He ensured it happened in a way that sent a message to others. Bodies would be left where they'd be discovered, with clear signs of who was responsible. It wasn't just killing. It was calculated terror designed to establish the Outlaws' dominance and discourage anyone from challenging their authority. One particularly chilling example came in the mid-1990s when a member of the rival Hells Angels was found murdered in Florida. The victim hadn't just been killed, he'd been tortured extensively before death, with the Outlaws' distinctive insignia left as a calling card. No one was ever convicted for this specific murder, but law enforcement sources understood it carried Bowman's signature approach, making examples of enemies to reinforce the club's fearsome reputation across the country. During his reign, several Outlaws members who were suspected of cooperating with law enforcement similarly disappeared or were found murdered, stark warnings to anyone considering breaking the club's code of silence. Bowman maintained his power not just through fear, but through a sophisticated intelligence network that many corporate CEOs would envy. During his leadership, he established a system where information about law enforcement movements, rival clubs, and potential informants flowed up the chain of command. This network included corrupt law enforcement officers, courthouse employees, and even hospital workers who could tip him off about investigations or when injured rivals might be vulnerable. Before federal agents could execute a raid, Bowman often knew it was coming and would be nowhere to be found. This intelligence system helped him evade serious charges for years, despite being linked to dozens of murders, bombings, and large-scale drug operations across multiple states. By 1997, the FBI had had enough. They placed Bowman on their 10 most wanted list, alongside terrorists and serial killers, offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to his capture. Even then, Bowman remained elusive, protected by the club's code of silence and a network of safe houses across the country. his reign finally began to crack when several club members facing their own lengthy prison sentences decided to break the code of silence. In June 1999, Bowman was arrested while hiding at a home in Sterling Heights, Michigan. The list of charges against him read like a criminal encyclopedia: murder, conspiracy to commit murder, bombing, and racketeering. During his trial, frightening details emerged about how Bowman had ordered the deaths of rivals, suspected informants, and even innocent bystanders who simply got in the way of club business. One particularly disturbing testimony described how he casually ordered the murder of a club member's girlfriend because she knew too much about their operations. In 2001, justice finally caught up with Taco Bowman when he was convicted in federal court and sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Today, he remains behind bars at the Administrative Maximum Facility in Florence, Colorado, America's highest security federal prison, often called the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Even from prison, rumors persist that Bowman maintains influence over parts of the club through coded messages and loyal visitors. Bowman died in 2019. But while Bowman may have been a master at maintaining loyalty through fear, our next dangerous outlaw showed what happens when that loyalty shatters in the most devastating way possible. Number 9. Randy Mark Yeager.
Known by his nickname Mad, Randy Yeager was the regional president of the Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana area.
When the FBI added Randy Mark Yeager to their most wanted list in 1997, it marked a rare instance when an outlaw biker reached the same notorious status as serial killers and terrorist masterminds. As the former regional president of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club's violent Chicago chapter, Yeager had built a reputation for extreme brutality and unwavering loyalty to the club, qualities that made his eventual 14-year run from justice all the more remarkable. With his intimidating physical presence, standing over 6 feet tall with a heavy build, long hair and full beard, Yeager embodied the outlaw biker image that struck fear into both rivals and law-abiding citizens alike. Born in 1957, Yeager rose through the ranks of the Outlaws during the club's most violent and expansionist period under Harry Taco Bowman's leadership. While Bowman provided the strategic direction, men like Yeager served as the brutal enforcers who turned those plans into bloody reality. Throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, Yeager's name became synonymous with the Outlaws' most extreme enforcement actions against rival clubs, particularly in the ongoing war with the Hells Angels for control of lucrative criminal territories across the Midwest. Former members would later testify that Yeager didn't just participate in violence, he reveled in it, often volunteering for the most dangerous and brutal assignments. What distinguished Yeager from other enforcers was his combination of physical intimidation and tactical thinking. He wasn't just muscle, he was someone who could plan complex operations against rival clubs and then personally lead the assault. This dual capacity made him particularly valuable to the Outlaws' leadership and particularly dangerous to anyone who crossed him. Law enforcement sources described operations where Yeager coordinated multi-state efforts to target Hells Angels affiliates, using counter-surveillance techniques and military-like planning that showed a level of sophistication far beyond typical gang violence. By 1994, federal authorities had compiled enough evidence to bring massive racketeering charges against the Outlaws' leadership, including Yeager. The indictment read like a catalog of organized crime: murder, arson, bombings, drug trafficking, and witness intimidation. Most of the indicted Outlaws members were quickly arrested, but Yeager had vanished. While many expected him to be caught within months, no one anticipated that he would become one of the most successful fugitives in American criminal history, evading capture for an astonishing 14 years. While on the run, Yeager wasn't living in caves or surviving in the wilderness. According to what authorities would later discover, he had established a comfortable life in Baja California, Mexico, living with his girlfriend Margie Jelovcic in a modest but pleasant house near the beach. Locals knew him as Stephen Bowman, an American expatriate who kept to himself but was otherwise friendly. The choice of alias was telling, seemingly a tribute to his former boss, Harry Taco Bowman. For years, this former enforcer, notorious for extreme violence, lived quietly as a neighborhood handyman, showing how completely some career criminals can reinvent themselves when necessary. The beginning of the end for Yeager's time on the run came through an anonymous tip to the U.S. Marshals Service in 2014. After 14 years of freedom, Yeager was finally located and tracked to a bar in Rosarito Beach, Mexico. When Mexican federal police and U.S. Marshals closed in to arrest him, they faced not the violent resistance many expected, but a middle-aged man who seemed resigned to his fate. The fearsome enforcer had been replaced by a weathered fugitive who surrendered without incident. Tragically, his girlfriend Margie attempted to flee in their vehicle during the arrest, losing control and dying in the resulting crash, adding one final casualty to Yeager's long history of violence and chaos. When Yeager was returned to the United States after nearly a decade and a half as a fugitive, he faced justice for crimes that had occurred so long ago that many witnesses had died, memories had faded, and some case files had been archived. Nevertheless, the federal case against him remained strong, built on witness testimony and documentary evidence preserved specifically in anticipation of his eventual capture. In 2016, Yeager finally pled guilty to racketeering conspiracy charges, accepting a 15-year prison sentence rather than risk trial and a potential life term. As Yeager began serving his prison sentence, another major figure was emerging in the outlaw motorcycle world, someone who would take a more strategic approach to leadership than the enforcers of previous generations. Number 8. Jack Rosger. When Milwaukee Jack Rosger took control of the American Outlaw Association, AOA, better known as the Outlaws Motorcycle Club, in the mid-2000s, he inherited an organization still reeling from the leadership vacuum left by predecessors like Harry Bowman. Many expected the club to keep a low profile while rebuilding. Instead, Rosger took a dramatically different approach. He declared open war on the Outlaws' biggest rivals, the Hells Angels, launching one of the bloodiest chapters in modern outlaw motorcycle club history. Unlike the stereotypical wild-eyed, hard-drinking biker, Rosger presented himself with a calculated composure that belied his violent intentions. Clean-cut when needed, articulate in his speech, and methodical in his planning, he brought an almost corporate approach to running what was fundamentally a criminal enterprise. Law enforcement officials who tracked his activities described him as a strategic thinker who approached running the Outlaws like a military campaign, with clear objectives, territorial goals, and a willingness to accept casualties to achieve longer-term dominance. Taking control around 2007, Rosger quickly identified what he saw as the club's biggest problem: territory that had been lost to the Hells Angels and their support clubs during years of fragmented leadership. Rather than accepting this new reality, Rosger developed a nationwide strategy to reclaim these areas and expand into new ones. At a national officers' meeting in 2008, he reportedly laid out his vision in stark terms, telling his captains it was time to put the Hells Angels back in their place, whatever it took. What followed was a calculated campaign of violence that stretched from Maine to Florida, transforming localized disputes into a coordinated national conflict. What made Rosger's approach uniquely terrifying was its methodical nature combined with modern technology. FBI wiretaps would later reveal that Rosger studied books on guerrilla warfare and corporate takeovers alike, applying these principles to the criminal underworld. He wasn't just telling members to attack rivals. He was creating elaborate plans involving multiple chapters, counter-surveillance to watch for police, and strict communications protocols to avoid detection. This wasn't street gang violence. This was organized crime operating with military-like discipline and structure. The human toll of Rosger's war was substantial. While exact numbers are difficult to confirm due to the reluctance of many victims to cooperate with police, law enforcement sources attribute at least 24 serious assaults, several disappearances presumed to be murders, and at least 4 confirmed killings to the campaign Rosger orchestrated. And these are just the cases they know about. Many incidents likely went unreported due to the outlaw code against involving law enforcement. Perhaps most disturbing was Rosger's ability to maintain a veneer of legitimacy while orchestrating this violence. He would appear at legitimate motorcycle events, speak about brotherhood and freedom, and present the Outlaws as simply a group of motorcycle enthusiasts exercising their rights to associate. This dual identity, public motorcycle club president and private criminal mastermind, made him particularly difficult for law enforcement to corner. His downfall began in June 2010 when federal agents who had infiltrated the club's inner circle gathered enough evidence to move against him. The resulting indictment charged Rosger with conspiracy to commit violence in aid of racketeering, essentially orchestrating a criminal war across state lines. The evidence presented at trial painted a damning picture. Prosecutors played recordings of Rosger discussing planned assaults, displayed maps showing coordinated territory expansion, and presented witness testimony describing his direct involvement in planning violent acts. Despite the traditionally tight-lipped nature of outlaw motorcycle clubs, 4 members eventually broke ranks and testified against him. In December 2010, a federal jury convicted Rosger. The judge, unimpressed by defense claims that the Outlaws were just a motorcycle club exercising First Amendment rights to free association, sentenced him to 20 years in federal prison. Even from behind bars, rumors persist that Rosger maintains influence over club operations through a complex system of coded messages and loyal intermediaries. While Rosger represented the dangerous evolution of the outlaw biker into a strategic criminal leader, our next figure demonstrates how the outlaw mystique could be leveraged in an entirely different arena: the world of music and entertainment. Number 7. David Allan Coe. When music fans hear the name David Allan Coe, they typically think of country music hits like "You Never Even Called Me by My Name" and "Take This Job and Shove It," which he wrote but was made famous by Johnny Paycheck. What many don't realize is that behind the success and rhinestone suits was a genuine outlaw with deep connections to the criminal underworld, a man who managed to hide his darkest sides in plain sight while becoming a country music star. Unlike the previous figures on our list, who operated primarily in the shadows, Coe built his career in the spotlight. What made him dangerous wasn't just his criminal background, but how he used his music career as both cover and confession for a life that included serious criminal activities. Born in Akron, Ohio in 1939, Coe's path to outlaw status began early. By his teens, he was already in trouble with the law, spending much of his youth in reform schools and juvenile detention. This escalated to adult prison time, including a stint in the Ohio State Penitentiary for car theft, where he claims to have killed a fellow inmate who demanded sexual favors. While this particular claim has never been verified, like many of Coe's prison stories, what's undeniable is that upon his release in 1967, he emerged as someone deeply embedded in the outlaw world. His first performances weren't in honky-tonks or bars. They were outside prison walls, playing for convicts who recognized one of their own. His early musical persona was built around his prison experiences, with Coe often performing in chains and a Lone Ranger mask, explicitly marketing himself as the mysterious rhinestone cowboy, an ex-con turned musician. Coe's musical talent was undeniable. His songwriting showed a rare ability to capture raw emotion and tell stories that resonated with working-class audiences. This talent earned him entry into Nashville's music scene, where he began building a career while maintaining his connections to a much darker world. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, as his legitimate music career grew, Coe maintained deep ties to outlaw motorcycle clubs, particularly the Outlaws MC. He frequently appeared at biker events throughout the South and Midwest, often wearing an Outlaws MC supporter shirt or vest. These weren't casual connections. Former associates describe Coe as someone who understood and lived by the outlaw code. What made Coe particularly dangerous was his dual existence. By day, he could be recording with mainstream country stars or performing on major stages. By night, he moved through the outlaw world with the ease of someone who belonged there. This ability to switch between worlds gave him unique cover for activities that would have landed others in prison. Behind the scenes, law enforcement sources have suggested Coe's involvement in gun running and drug trafficking operations throughout the 1970s, using his touring schedule as cover for moving illegal merchandise across state lines. His tour bus and equipment trucks were rarely searched at state lines. What better way to transport contraband than hidden among amplifiers and musical equipment? Musicians already travel with large vehicles full of equipment that crosses state lines regularly, and entertainment figures often get special treatment. creating the perfect cover for moving illegal products across jurisdictions. By the late 1990s, Coe's financial troubles caught up with him when the IRS came calling for approximately $400,000 in unpaid taxes. True to his outlaw image, Coe simply refused to pay, leading to years of hiding money and performing for cash only. He was finally forced to settle with the government in 2003. Now in his 80s, Coe continues to perform occasionally, a living link to an outlaw past that most only know through watered-down movies and TV shows. The question remains, how many secrets will die with him when he finally takes the last ride? While Coe represents how the outlaw mystique could be leveraged in the entertainment world, our final figure shows what happens when an outlaw's actions are so extreme that even the justice system struggles to handle them properly, creating one of the most controversial cases in Florida's criminal history. Number 6. Joe Spaziano. In the world of outlaw motorcycle clubs, nicknames are rarely given without reason. So when Joseph Crazy Joe Spaziano earned his moniker, it spoke volumes about a man considered unstable even by the loose standards of the outlaw biker world. As a founding member of the Florida chapter of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club in the late 1960s, Spaziano quickly built a reputation for extreme violence and erratic behavior that made him feared by enemies and allies alike. Standing over 6 feet tall with wild eyes and an unkempt beard, Spaziano became the boogeyman other outlaws warned about. The enforcer you didn't want showing up at your door. What made him particularly dangerous wasn't just his capacity for violence, but its unpredictability. Most outlaw enforcers had clear reasons for their violent actions: money, territory, club business, or personal vendettas. With Spaziano, no such predictability existed. Minor slights, or sometimes nothing at all, could trigger extreme violence that shocked even hardened criminals accustomed to the rough justice of the outlaw world. Unlike more strategic outlaws who used violence as a tool, Spaziano seemed to enjoy inflicting pain for its own sake. Former associates described instances where minor disagreements at club gatherings would end with Spaziano inflicting brutal beatings that went far beyond what even outlaw code considered acceptable. When he walked into a room, the atmosphere would instantly change as everyone, including fellow club members, became tense and watchful. The club tolerated his behavior because having someone that unpredictable was occasionally useful. People were terrified of him, which made them less likely to cross the outlaws. But there was always a sense among club leadership that sooner or later Spaziano would go too far. That moment came in 1973, when the mutilated body of a young woman named Laura Lynn Harberts was discovered in a trash dump near Altamonte Springs, Florida. The brutality of the crime shocked even veteran homicide detectives. While investigating this murder, authorities began looking at similar unsolved cases in the area and soon connected another murder with similar characteristics to Spaziano. His reputation for extreme and unpredictable violence made him an immediate suspect in these particularly brutal killings. After his arrest, what unfolded was one of the strangest cases in Florida criminal history. Based largely on the testimony of a witness who claimed to have recovered repressed memories under hypnosis, Spaziano was convicted and sentenced to death for Harbert's murder. This was long before the scientific community had thoroughly debunked many aspects of repressed memory theory and hypnosis-based testimony. The witness claimed that under hypnosis, he remembered seeing Spaziano with the victim near the time of her disappearance. Testimony that would be considered highly problematic by modern legal standards. What made Spaziano's case particularly disturbing was that despite his violent reputation and general instability, serious questions existed about whether he had committed these particular crimes. The case against him rested heavily on testimony that would never be admissible in court today. Memories recovered through hypnosis sessions that many experts now view as highly unreliable. There was no physical evidence linking him directly to the murders, which is unusual in such brutal crimes where perpetrators typically leave behind evidence. For 19 years, Spaziano sat on death row, maintaining his innocence while coming within days of execution multiple times. His case became increasingly controversial as questions arose about the reliability of the hypnosis-induced testimony. Eventually, the key witness recanted, claiming police had pressured him to identify Spaziano. In a twist that stunned the legal world, Spaziano's conviction was overturned in 1995 after an investigation by the Miami Herald revealed serious flaws in the case. He was granted a new trial, and in 1996, prosecutors decided not to retry him for the murder, instead keeping him incarcerated on other charges. Released in 2001 after serving 20 years behind bars, Spaziano vanished into obscurity. Rumors occasionally surface about sightings in small towns across the South, but the man once known as Crazy Joe seems to have finally found the anonymity that eluded him during his outlaw prime. His legacy remains complicated, viewed by some as a victim of a flawed justice system, and by others as a dangerous killer who ultimately escaped full accountability for his crimes. The truth, as with many outlaw tales, likely lies somewhere in the shadows. While Crazy Joe Spaziano terrorized Florida with unpredictable violence that made even fellow outlaws nervous, up north John Petrarca was building a very different kind of danger, using a calculating mind to quietly forge alliances between outlaw motorcycle clubs and traditional organized crime families that would transform criminal operations across the Northeast. Number 5. John Petrarca.
John Petrarca, the president of the club, and another member, Robert Anderson, arraigned on charges of arson and...
In the world of outlaw motorcycle clubs, some of the most powerful figures aren't always the ones making headlines. John Petrarca embodied this principle perfectly, operating as one of the most influential yet least publicly known figures in the northeastern outlaw motorcycle world throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Unlike the stereotypical image of the loud, brash biker, Petrarca cultivated a deliberately low profile that made him all the more effective and dangerous as he built networks between outlaw motorcycle clubs and traditional organized crime families that would reshape criminal enterprises across multiple states. Standing around 5 feet 10 inches with a stocky build and typically dressed in simple jeans and leather, Petrarca didn't immediately stand out in a crowd. This unassuming appearance served as perfect camouflage for a man who regularly moved between the flashy world of New York's organized crime families and the grittier realm of outlaw motorcycle clubs. What made Petrarca uniquely dangerous wasn't just his connections, but his intelligence. Associates described him as having a banker's mind in a biker's body, able to structure complex money laundering operations and criminal enterprises that remained invisible to law enforcement for years. Born in northern New Jersey in the early 1950s, Petrarca's entry into the outlaw world came gradually through family connections to both traditional Italian-American organized crime and the emerging outlaw motorcycle scene. By his mid-20s, he had established himself as someone who could move comfortably between these worlds, serving as a crucial bridge at a time when most mafia figures viewed bikers with disdain, and most bikers wanted nothing to do with the mafia's rigid hierarchies. Petrarca recognized before many others that these two criminal subcultures had much to offer each other. The bikers had nationwide distribution networks and a willingness to handle the most violent aspects of the business, while the mafia had international connections and sophisticated financial schemes. Throughout the 1980s, Petrarca orchestrated partnerships that were never formalized on paper, but transformed how drugs, illegal weapons, and stolen goods moved across the northeastern United States. His genius lay in creating buffer zones of deniability. If law enforcement managed to infiltrate one part of the operation, they would find it nearly impossible to connect it to other components. He implemented cellular structures where different outlaw motorcycle club chapters handled specific aspects of criminal operations without knowing the full scope, while mafia associates handled the money side with similar compartmentalization. What truly set Petrarca apart was his patient, long-term thinking. While many criminal figures sought immediate profits and status, Petrarca built systems designed to last decades. He established legitimate businesses, everything from motorcycle repair shops to construction companies, that served dual purposes, laundering criminal proceeds while creating employment for loyal associates. These businesses became community fixtures, gradually building a facade of respectability that helped shield the criminal operations beneath. By the early 1990s, Petrarca controlled a network of over 24 such businesses across 4 states, each one a small piece in his carefully constructed empire. Law enforcement officials who investigated Petrarca described the frustration of building cases against him. Unlike flamboyant criminal figures who flaunted their wealth or power, Petrarca lived modestly in a middle-class neighborhood, drove American-made cars that weren't particularly new or flashy, and maintained minimal paper trails. He understood that survival in the criminal underworld demanded invisibility, and he practiced this principle religiously. When associates were arrested, they discovered Petrarca had insulated himself so thoroughly that connecting him to specific crimes proved nearly impossible. His downfall began not through traditional law enforcement methods, but through an internal conflict within one of the outlaw motorcycle clubs in his network. A leadership dispute erupted into violence, drawing unwanted attention to operations Petrarca had carefully kept in the shadows for years. As federal investigators descended on the club, they began to uncover the intricate connections Petrarca had established. Through financial forensics and testimony from arrested associates facing lengthy prison terms, authorities gradually assembled a comprehensive picture of Petrarca's criminal empire. In 1997, after a 3-year investigation involving multiple federal agencies, Petrarca was indicted on racketeering charges. The evidence, when finally assembled, revealed the true scope of his operation: drug trafficking networks spanning 7 states, money laundering operations processing over $10 million annually, and connections to at least 3 homicides where he had ordered but not personally carried out the killings. Despite his careful precautions, the sheer scale of his operation had eventually created too many potential weak points. Following a trial that revealed just how thoroughly he had infiltrated both legitimate businesses and criminal organizations throughout the Northeast, Petrarca was convicted and sentenced to 24 years in federal prison. Even after his incarceration, rumors persisted that he maintained influence over certain operations from behind bars, though the extent of this continued control remained speculative. What's certain is that the criminal networks he established continued to function in various forms long after he was removed from direct control. While John Petrarca operated as a shadowy power broker between the outlaw motorcycle world and traditional organized crime, Thomas "Tomcat" Maine emerged as something entirely different. A warrior willing to put himself on the front lines of America's bloodiest biker conflicts, earning the reputation as one of the most feared enforcers in Outlaws MC history. Number 4. Thomas "Tomcat" Maine. In the violent world of outlaw motorcycle clubs, most members talk tough, but only a select few earn reputations that make even hardened criminals pause. Thomas "Tomcat" Maine wasn't just another patch-wearer. He was the embodiment of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club's warrior ethos, a man whose name became synonymous with unflinching violence and absolute loyalty during the bloodiest chapter of modern biker warfare. As the Outlaws' national enforcer and a member of their elite Black Region Special Operations Unit, Maine represented a new breed of outlaw, one who combined tactical training with traditional biker brutality to create something uniquely lethal. Born in the working-class suburbs of Chicago in the early 1950s, Maine's path to outlaw royalty began with military service in the late 1960s, where he developed skills that would later make him exceptionally dangerous in the criminal underworld. Unlike many who drifted into biker culture through drugs or rebellion, Maine was drawn to the structure and brotherhood aspects of outlaw clubs, seeing in them a reflection of the military camaraderie he had experienced. By the mid-1970s, he had prospected with the Outlaws Chicago chapter, quickly establishing himself as someone who never backed down from violence and executed orders with military precision. Maine earned his road name Tomcat through a combination of tactical prowess and predatory violence. Like his namesake aircraft, he was both technically sophisticated and devastatingly effective. Fellow outlaws described his unusual calm during chaotic situations, with one former member noting, "Most guys get amped up before something goes down. Tom got quieter, more focused. That's when you knew something serious was about to happen." This cold calculation made him particularly valuable as tensions with rival clubs escalated throughout the 1980s and 1990s. His rise to national prominence came during the Outlaws' territorial war with the Hells Angels, when Maine was appointed to the club's elite enforcement arm, known as the Black Region. This secretive unit operated across chapter boundaries, handling the most sensitive and violent assignments for the national leadership. As part of this unit, Maine reportedly participated in numerous operations against Hells Angels members and their support clubs, earning additional patches that insiders understood represented confirmed kills for the club. What distinguished Maine from other violent outlaws was his methodical approach. Unlike enforcers who relied solely on intimidation and brute force, he applied military-style planning to outlaw operations. Former associates described him meticulously researching targets, studying locations for days before attacks, and creating detailed escape plans. This tactical sophistication made operations under his direction particularly effective and difficult for law enforcement to solve afterward. By the late 1990s, Maine had been elevated to the Outlaws' national leadership structure, serving as both a regional president and the club's national enforcer, a position responsible for maintaining discipline and coordinating responses to external threats. During this period, federal authorities identified him as a key figure in what they described as an organized campaign of violence against rival clubs, particularly in the South and Midwest regions where territorial conflicts were most intense. Maine's downfall began in 2004 when federal authorities launched Operation Roadrunner, a massive RICO investigation targeting Outlaws' leadership. As arrests mounted and former members began cooperating with prosecutors, Maine became a primary target due to his direct involvement in the club's most serious violent crimes. In June 2005, federal agents surrounded his Maine home to serve arrest warrants related to racketeering and murder charges. Rather than surrender, Maine chose a path few outlaws take beyond their tough talk. He engaged federal agents in a gun battle, dying in the exchange of fire at age 59. His death immediately transformed him into an outlaw legend. The Outlaws created memorial patches bearing his name, and his final stand became part of the club's mythology, the warrior who lived and died by the outlaw code. Law enforcement sources later revealed that evidence linked Maine to at least 7 murders across 4 states, though the true count may have been higher. In death, he achieved what many outlaw bikers only talk about, a reputation that would be remembered and respected throughout the club's territories. While Thomas "Tomcat" Maine built his fearsome legacy through tactical precision and frontline combat in the American Outlaws MC, Mario "The Wop" Parente took a different approach in Canada, transforming from a Satan's Choice street fighter into a strategic Outlaws president who would wage a decades-long territorial war against the Hells Angels through both brutal violence and calculated alliances. Number 3. Mario "The Wop" Parente. The Canadian outlaw motorcycle scene of the 1970s was a powder keg waiting to explode, and Mario "The Wop" Parente lit the match that would ignite decades of bloody conflict. Born to Italian immigrants in Hamilton, Ontario, Parente's journey from construction worker and nightclub bouncer to one of Canada's most notorious outlaw leaders represents a pivotal chapter in North American biker history. His reputation wasn't built on wild exaggeration or media hype. It was earned through calculated violence, unwavering loyalty, and a willingness to wage all-out war against the Hells Angels for control of Canada's criminal underworld. Parente's outlaw journey began in 1967 when he joined the Satan's Choice MC, at that time Canada's largest and most feared motorcycle club. Unlike many who were drawn to the lifestyle by the motorcycles themselves, Parente was attracted to the brotherhood, power, and respect that came with membership in an outlaw club. His natural leadership abilities and willingness to engage in violence quickly set him apart. Fellow members noted his particular talent for intimidation. He didn't need to be the biggest man in the room to be the most feared. Within just a few years, he had earned patches that insiders understood to signify he had committed murder for the club, though these specific crimes were never proven in court. By the early 1970s, Parente had risen to chapter president within Satan's Choice, establishing himself as a force to be reckoned with in Hamilton's underworld. It was during this period that he made a decision that would shape the future of Canadian biker wars. He vetoed the membership application of Walter "Wally" Stadnik, a diminutive but ambitious prospect standing just 5 feet 4 inches. The rejection was based partly on Stadnik's small stature, which Parente believed would undermine the club's intimidating image. This seemingly minor leadership decision would create a bitter rivalry that eventually erupted into one of the bloodiest conflicts in outlaw motorcycle history. The year 1977 marked a turning point when Satan's Choice national president Bernie Guindon was imprisoned, creating a leadership vacuum. Garnett Mother McGugan took control and orchestrated a momentous decision. Satan's Choice would patch over to the Outlaws MC, one of America's Big Four outlaw clubs. This move instantly positioned them as enemies of the Hells Angels, who were already expanding their Canadian presence. Parente embraced the new colors and quickly rose in the Outlaws' hierarchy, committed to defending their territory against the Angels' encroachment. The simmering tension exploded into open warfare on February 17, 1978, when Hells Angels associate Apache Shaw shot 2 Outlaws members, killing 1. The Outlaws' response was swift and brutal. In what became known as the Le Terraza Boyan massacre, 2 outlaws stormed a Montreal bar patronized by Angels supporters, opening fire and killing a Hells Angel and 2 Wild Ones MC members. This bloody exchange marked the beginning of a full-scale biker war, with Parente emerging as one of its primary strategists and combatants. Meanwhile, the man Parente had rejected, Wally Stadnick, had found a home with the Hells Angels and risen to become their Canadian national president. The personal animosity between the 2 men added fuel to the already raging organizational conflict. Stadnick adopted an expansion-focused approach, absorbing smaller clubs to grow the Angels' numbers, while Parente maintained a more traditional quality-over-quantity philosophy for the Outlaws. Parente's willingness to personally engage in violence was demonstrated in 1983 during one of the most notorious incidents of his career. Spotting a bus carrying Hells Angels members through northern Ontario, Parente and his crew followed the vehicle to a coffee shop in Wawa. Recognizing their rivals through the windows, the Outlaws retrieved weapons and opened fire on the bus. Though remarkably no one was killed, Parente was arrested for attempted murder. While awaiting trial for the bus shooting, Parente faced another life-or-death confrontation in 1984. The Lewis brothers, a feared criminal family with a grudge against the Outlaws, arrived at the club's headquarters seeking revenge. Seeing them approach, Parente grabbed a shotgun and fired, killing Jimmy Lewis in what he later claimed was self-defense. The courts disagreed, convicting him of manslaughter and sentencing him to 30 months in prison. Released in 1988, Parente returned to find himself the target of multiple assassination attempts, including a plot by the Musitano crime family to eliminate him. The fact that he survived these attempts only added to his legendary status within the outlaw world. Throughout the 1990s, he focused on consolidating outlaw power in Ontario, while Stadnick continued expanding Hells Angels territory. By 2000, the tide had turned against the Outlaws when Stadnick orchestrated a massive recruitment drive, offering Ontario biker clubs a patch-for-patch deal to join the Hells Angels while maintaining their rank and status. Dozens of clubs switched allegiances, severely weakening the Outlaws' position. Recognizing the existential threat, Parente reached out to American Outlaws president James Frank Wheeler, who in turn contacted Hells Angels leader Sonny Barger. Though a truce was negotiated, it was clear the Outlaws were losing the Canadian biker war. The final blow to Parente's reign came in 2002 when Ontario Provincial Police launched Project Retire, a massive crackdown resulting in 58 arrests, including Parente himself. Though the charges against him ultimately collapsed when key witnesses refused to testify, the legal battle left him financially ruined. Disillusioned by the lack of support from his fellow outlaws during his troubles, Parente eventually resigned as national president and retreated into legitimate work in the construction industry. While Parente represented the establishment of enduring outlaw power in Canada, our next figure demonstrates how these organizations expanded westward, establishing new territories and connecting previously isolated criminal markets. John Ermin would take the organizational principles developed by leaders like Parente and apply them to new frontiers, creating networks that would transform the criminal landscape across multiple states. Number 2. John Ermin. In the complex ecosystem of outlaw motorcycle clubs, certain figures operate not as visible leaders, but as crucial connectors. Men whose power comes not from official titles, but from their ability to link different criminal networks into cohesive operations. John Ehrman exemplified this role throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, operating primarily in the western states as a shadow power broker whose influence extended far beyond any official position he held. While less publicly known than presidents like Parente, Ehrman's impact on the expansion and sophistication of outlaw operations across multiple state lines made him one of the most significant figures in modern outlaw motorcycle history. Born in 1954 in a small town outside of Reno, Nevada, Ehrman's early life provided little indication of the significant role he would later play in outlaw motorcycle culture. Raised in a working-class family with no particular criminal connections, he discovered motorcycles in his late teens and quickly became immersed in the growing biker scene of the 1970s Nevada desert. What distinguished Ehrman from countless other young men attracted to motorcycle culture was his exceptional intelligence, combined with a natural talent for connecting people and identifying opportunities that others missed. Standing just under 6 feet tall with an unremarkable appearance that allowed him to blend into almost any setting, Ehrman cultivated a deliberately low profile throughout his criminal career. Unlike many outlaw figures who embraced visible signs of their affiliation through tattoos, patches, and distinctive clothing, Ehrman could easily pass for a middle-class business traveler when necessary. This chameleon-like quality became one of his greatest assets, allowing him to move between different worlds, from outlaw clubhouses to casino boardrooms to legitimate business meetings, without attracting unwanted attention. By the mid-1980s, Ehrman had established himself as an independent contractor of sorts, working with multiple outlaw motorcycle clubs rather than pledging exclusive loyalty to any single organization. This unusual position would have been impossible for most, but Ehrman's unique talents and careful diplomacy made him valuable enough that clubs were willing to share his services. He developed expertise in creating secure transportation corridors for drugs, weapons, and cash across the western United States, establishing routes that minimized exposure to law enforcement surveillance while maximizing efficiency. What truly distinguished Ehrman's operations was their scale. By the early 1990s, he had established transportation networks spanning from the Mexican border through California, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and into Canada. These weren't simple drug-running operations, but comprehensive systems that moved multiple types of contraband in both directions. Drugs might travel northward, while weapons and cash moved south, with legitimate goods sometimes mixed in as cover. The economic impact was substantial. At the height of these operations, tens of millions of dollars in illegal merchandise moved through Ehrman's networks annually. Perhaps most remarkably, Ehrman managed to operate for nearly 2 decades without facing serious criminal charges. This wasn't merely luck, but the result of his obsessive attention to security and his understanding of law enforcement techniques. He maintained strict communications discipline, frequently changing phones and vehicles, avoiding electronic communications for sensitive matters, and compartmentalizing information so that even his close associates knew only their specific roles rather than the full scope of operations. He kept no records, managed no territory, and held no official position within any club, making him an almost invisible target for prosecutors building conspiracy cases. By the early 2000s, however, the increasingly sophisticated surveillance capabilities of federal agencies began to close in on Ehrman's operations. A multi-agency task force focusing on interstate transportation of narcotics eventually identified patterns in the movement of vehicles and goods that pointed to a centrally organized network. Through confidential informants, electronic surveillance, and traditional investigation, authorities gradually assembled a picture of Ehrman's role as the architectural mastermind behind multiple trafficking corridors. In 2004, after a 3-year investigation involving the DEA, FBI, and state agencies across 7 states, Ehrman was indicted on multiple federal charges, including conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, interstate transportation of stolen goods, and racketeering. The case against him was built largely on the testimony of former associates who had been arrested in various operations and chose to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. The evidence revealed the true scope of his operations for the first time, showing how he had created an interstate criminal infrastructure that multiple outlaw motorcycle clubs had utilized for years. After a lengthy trial that exposed the inner workings of outlaw motorcycle operations throughout the western United States, Ehrman was convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to 27 years in federal prison. His conviction represented a significant disruption to illegal transportation networks throughout the region, forcing outlaw motorcycle clubs to rebuild systems that had taken decades to develop and perfect. While his name never achieved the notoriety of more public outlaw figures, his impact on the evolution of these organizations from local clubs to interstate criminal networks was profound and lasting. As we turn to our final figure, we move from the shadows where Ehrman operated to the highest levels of formal outlaw leadership with James Frank Wheeler, a man who would take command of an entire national organization during one of its most turbulent periods. Number 1. James Frank Wheeler. When James Frank Wheeler assumed the national presidency of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club in 1999, he inherited an organization at a crossroads. Federal prosecutions had removed much of the previous leadership. Rival clubs were encroaching on traditional outlaws' territory, and changing criminal markets threatened the club's financial foundations. What followed was one of the most aggressive periods of expansion and conflict in outlaw motorcycle history, as Wheeler transformed a defensive organization into an advancing army that would challenge rivals across multiple states and international borders. His relatively brief but extraordinarily violent tenure would reshape the outlaw landscape in ways that continue to reverberate today. Born in 1942 in Indianapolis, Wheeler came to outlaw life relatively late compared to many club leaders. He didn't prospect for the outlaws until his 30s, after serving in the military and working several legitimate jobs. This background gave him perspectives and experiences unusual among outlaw leaders, including organizational skills from military service and business acumen from his time in conventional employment. Standing around 5 feet 10 inches with a solid build and typically sporting a full beard, Wheeler projected an image of calm authority rather than impulsive aggression. Former associates describe a man who rarely raised his voice, but whose quiet instructions were followed without question. Wheeler's rise through outlaws' leadership came through a combination of intelligence, ruthlessness, and strategic thinking. As president of the Indianapolis chapter throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, he transformed a once rowdy local club into a disciplined criminal operation with diversified income streams and strong territorial control. His success at the local level eventually brought him to national leadership attention, and he served in various regional and national positions before assuming the top role in 1999. This gradual ascension gave him deep knowledge of the organization's strengths and weaknesses across different regions. What distinguished Wheeler's national presidency was his aggressive response to challenges from rival clubs, particularly the Hells Angels. While previous leaders had often taken defensive postures, protecting existing territory rather than expanding, Wheeler implemented what amounted to a declaration of war against rivals. He directed Outlaws chapters to actively target Hells Angels operations, support clubs, and businesses across the United States and Canada. This wasn't random violence, but coordinated campaigns designed to systematically weaken Angels' control in specific regions and establish Outlaws' dominance. The strategic nature of Wheeler's approach became evident in his focus on support clubs, smaller motorcycle groups allied with larger organizations. Recognizing that these clubs often provided crucial manpower and street-level distribution networks, Wheeler directed operations specifically targeting Angel support clubs in the Midwest and South. Through intimidation, violence, and occasional financial incentives, he orchestrated the flipping of several support clubs from Angels' allegiance to Outlaws' affiliation, effectively transferring control of territory without directly engaging the Angels themselves. Wheeler's reign began to unravel in 2001 when federal authorities launched Operation Roadrunner, a massive multi-agency investigation targeting Outlaws' leadership across multiple states. Through wiretaps, surveillance, informants, and undercover operations, investigators gradually assembled evidence of Wheeler's role in directing a criminal enterprise responsible for drug trafficking, violence, and racketeering across state lines. In a coordinated sweep, federal agents arrested dozens of Outlaws members, including Wheeler himself. The case against Wheeler was built around the RICO statute, which allowed prosecutors to tie him to the broader pattern of criminal activity throughout the organization he led, even without direct evidence linking him to specific violent acts. Former outlaws who became government witnesses described meetings where Wheeler laid out territorial strategies, approved campaigns against rival clubs, and directed the distribution of criminal proceeds through the organization's hierarchy. These testimonies, combined with financial records and surveillance evidence, created a compelling picture of Wheeler as the architect of a criminal conspiracy spanning multiple states. In 2004, after a trial that exposed the inner workings of one of America's largest outlaw motorcycle clubs, Wheeler was convicted on multiple federal charges including racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, and drug trafficking. He received a sentence of 16.5 years in federal prison, effectively ending his reign as national president and disrupting the aggressive expansion strategy he had implemented. The conviction of Wheeler and many of his top lieutenants represented one of the most significant blows against outlaw motorcycle club leadership in American history.
To court documents, the biker gang allegedly poured millions gained from an underground gambling ring into...
Your best bet would be to walk in the opposite direction when you see a patched member of a biker gang approaching. But if it's any of these 10 most dangerous bikers in history, you better run as fast as you can. Number 10. Maurice Mom Boucher. While Sonny Barger is well known for being the founding member of the Hells Angels, it was Maurice Mom Boucher who arguably put them on the map, and not in a good way. Boucher had the nickname Mom because of his attention to detail, as he pestered his men with questions to make certain that they thought of everything, just like a loving but overbearing mother. You see, the Hells Angels originated in the United States as a biker group, mostly composed of outlaws, henceforth becoming an outlaw biker group by design. Law enforcement agencies treated the group with suspicion, but ultimately believed that they were harmless. That was until Mom Boucher came into the scene. While also one of the very first members of the notorious gang, Boucher was a member of the Canadian Hells Angels. Born to a struggling family in Quebec, Boucher's childhood was anything but peaceful. He was one of 8 siblings, born to an alcoholic father and a stay-at-home mother. According to reports, Maurice's father was frequently violent with his family and reportedly had ties to the mafia. Corruption and crime were commonplace where Maurice grew up. It was almost like he didn't have a chance at becoming anything other than a criminal. Ultimately, when he was in the 9th grade, Maurice dropped out of school because of his indifference and began working odd jobs. Soon enough, at the age of 19, he found himself arrested for the first time for stealing $200. This would just be the first of many crimes he committed throughout his lifetime. Maurice couldn't hold a stable job for the life of him. He'd tried to get into the construction industry like his father, but would always end up being fired because of his consistent drug use. By 1974, Maurice was addicted to drugs and alcohol and would reportedly do anything to fuel his addiction. This included breaking and entering into a slew of homes, establishments, and committing petty crimes on the street. In Maurice's own words, he was a cold-hearted man who lacked empathy. The only thing he actually cared about was money, and that was what led him to the Hells Angels. Before that, however, Maurice was part of the SS, also an outlaw motorcycle gang that doubled as a white supremacist group. Maurice was one of several white Canadian men who found it fun to steal from and antagonize non-white Canadian immigrants. Eventually, once they realized this wasn't making the SS any money, they turned towards making and selling drugs. This was when Maurice became a topic of interest in law enforcement circles. According to officers, it was obvious that Maurice couldn't read or write properly and that he was high on drugs half the time. Still, he remained as charismatic as ever when talking to officials. According to one officer, Maurice loved being in the spotlight. By this time, the Hells Angels had expanded its operations into Canada, but was by no means the biggest outlaw gang in the country. They gained prominence after the Lennoxville massacre, which saw over 5 members of the outlaw gang being unalived by their own brothers. In what was one of the most vicious gang-related crimes of all time, 5 members of the North Montreal chapter of the Hells Angels were slain by members of the South Montreal chapter. They believed that the Northern chapter had been skimming club assets and using the drugs for themselves for the most part. While other biker gangs shunned the Hells Angels for turning on their own, Maurice was amused. This just made him want to join the notorious group all the more, and he did just that in 1986. Maurice's crimes had now gone from petty thefts to armed invasions to extortion, and now he was being charged with assault and on the radar for an unaliving. In 1987, Maurice became a full-patch member of the Hells Angels, coincidentally around the same time when a rival gang leader, Martin Huneau, was assassinated. No one knows for sure, and Maurice has never been convicted of it, but the timing doesn't add up. In any case, Maurice was now the man to beat in the Hells Angels. He was known for his ruthlessness, cunningness, and the fact that he was willing to do whatever it took to get to the top. One Hells Angel who later turned Crown's evidence, Serge Boutin, testified at Boucher's trial in 2002. Monsieur Boucher was considered like a god when I'd see other Hells Angels around. Him, they were full of admiration. The Vikings, the Outlaws, and the Evil Ones, these were just three outlaw gangs who agreed to patch over to the Hells Angels under Maurice's growing influence. The fact of the matter was that the Hells Angels were gaining prominence because of Boucher. If it wasn't for his wit and charisma, it was for the fact that he was ruthless. During this time, however, the police weren't necessarily looking at Maurice as a rising name in the criminal world. For one, all of Maurice's crimes after joining the Hells Angels, and for the first few years, were contained within the outlaw community, who would go through hell and back, but never comply with law enforcement agencies. For another, no one really wanted to testify against Boucher because they feared him. Also, the police believed that the Lennoxville massacre had done enough damage, and that the Hells Angels were over with. They were wrong. While the police were too focused on gang leaders and mafiosos, Maurice was colluding with the same people. He was a part of the largest drug trade in 80s Canada, where he helped smuggle millions of dollars worth of cocaine into the country from Jamaica. Ultimately, when the police did conduct Project Jaggy, they arrested everyone involved except Maurice. The fact that he could get away with just about anything without any justice being served gave Maurice the confidence to go on. This would ultimately lead to the Quebec Biker War, a bloody event in Canadian history that'll send a shiver down anyone's spine to this day. The Quebec Biker War was a brutal and violent conflict that took place throughout the 1990s. It was primarily a turf war between two rival criminal organizations, the Hells Angels and a competing group called the Rock Machine. On 14 July 1994, two members of the Hells Angels' top puppet club, the Rockers, entered a downtown motorcycle shop and shot down a Rock Machine associate. This would be the spark that would set off the Quebec Biker War. By this time, Maurice had risen through the ranks and was the leader of the Montreal chapter of the Hells Angels. His ultimate aim was to take down the Rock Machine, created by a former associate of his from his time in the SS, and control all of Montreal's drug trade. Other rival groups had one by one patched over to the Hells Angels, but the Rock Machine persisted. For Maurice, this meant war. As tensions escalated, the conflict claimed over 160 lives, including not only gang members but also innocent civilians, law enforcement officers, and even an 11-year-old boy slain by a car bomb, a turning point that shocked the public. You see, Maurice wasn't about to back down, and in an attempt to gain public sympathy for the Hells Angels or shift police attention on the Rock Machine, he decided to sacrifice someone from the Angels. No, the 11-year-old was not the intended target, becoming collateral in a car bombing that was meant to take out a low-level dealer for the Hells Angels. This move showed that Maurice had completely shifted over to the dark side. To make matters worse, he also founded the Hells Angels Nomads chapter, which was not confined by geographical location and consisted of the worst of the worst. In Maurice's own words, this club was everything that the Hells Angels was, plus rock and roll. However, Boucher's prominence also made him a primary target for law enforcement, who recognized that dismantling his leadership was key to ending the violent turf war. Throughout the late 1990s, authorities intensified their investigations, using surveillance, wiretaps, and informants to build a case against him. In 1997, Boucher was charged with orchestrating the murders of two prison guards, Diane Lavigne and Pierre Rondeau, in what was a shocking escalation of gang tactics. The attacks were intended to spread fear and demonstrate the Hells Angels' ability to strike at the very core of the justice system. Although he was initially acquitted in 1998, that verdict was later overturned, and in a second trial, Boucher was found guilty in 2002. He received a life sentence with no possibility of parole, marking one of the most high-profile convictions in Canadian criminal history. Boucher remained behind bars until his passing in 2022, and while outlaw biker activity continued, it never reached the same level of open warfare seen during his reign. Number 9. David Lil Dave Santillan.
I know you've been doing a bang-up job with the club. Can't protect you from this point forward. I know we've had a, rapport, and I always looked out for you, and you were always respectful. So he gave me a heads up, and that was it. That was all it was about. There was nothing nefarious.
Don't let the name fool you. Lil Dave was anything but playful. As the most infamous member of the notorious outlaw biker group, the Mongols, David Santillan established himself as one of the most ruthless bikers to have ever lived. Also known as the Mongol Brotherhood or the Mongol Nation, Dave's outlaw gang started sometime in the late 1960s in California. Right now, the Mongols are the world's 5th largest outlaw gang, right after the Hells Angels, the Outlaws, the Bandidos, and the Pagans. Law enforcement estimates suggest that there are over 2,000 full-patched members across the United States and in at least 11 countries worldwide. Law enforcement also suggests that anyone coming across members of the Mongols should run in the opposite direction as fast as they can. You see, while Santillan has maintained his innocence, preaching that the Mongols are mischaracterized by the world and are in fact not a criminal organization, the US Department of Justice begs to differ. If anything, according to the DOJ and Europol, the Mongols are an organized criminal network with Dave at the helm. On that note, let's actually talk more about the notorious outlaw's rise to infamy. Not much is known about Dave's early childhood, but it's believed that he came from a relatively stable household and had a normal childhood by all accounts. Dave grew up in California and was heavily involved in the biker subculture. He might have been a low-level thug, but he never had any memorable run-ins with the law until the late 90s. That was when he became a member of the Mongols. The club had existed for close to 30 years at that point and was gaining prominence as the next big outlaw gang, following the Hells Angels. Dave arguably put them on the map once he joined, and was soon bumped up to the mother chapter, the governing body within the gang. It only took him 1 year to get to a place most bikers couldn't in decades, and that says all that needs to be said about his commitment to get the job done. Dave's first major run-in with the law occurred soon afterwards, and he was sentenced to a year in prison for committing mail fraud in 1999. By 2010, he had been appointed as the national president of the Mongols, a position he held for nearly 13 years. During his tenure, Dave was at the forefront of the club's efforts to maintain its identity and resist legal challenges, including a significant federal case that sought to strip the Mongols of their trademarked logo. He publicly defended the club, emphasizing its cultural significance and denying allegations that it operated as a criminal enterprise. The Mongols meant everything to Dave, and he was willing to do whatever it took to get them the upper hand. In 2018, the Mongols were convicted of racketeering and conspiracy, leading to a $500,000 fine. Dave was known for being a member of every meeting, always taking on an enthusiastic approach. The club believed that he would do that because he was interested in expanding their operations, but something happened that would undermine his credibility as a member of an outlaw gang. 3 years later, in 2021, a secretly recorded video surfaced in which Dave, during a conversation with his estranged wife, mentioned needing an exit strategy due to the impending retirement of ATF agent John Ciccone. This led to allegations that he'd been acting as a confidential informant for the ATF, undermining the club from within. Naturally, Dave claimed that he'd been set up and rebuffed claims that he was working with the feds. To put matters into perspective, not only do outlaw gangs not trust law enforcement agencies, but you cannot join a leading biker gang if you've ever been affiliated with an agency either. The allegations here were major, and who knows what other members of the Mongols would have done if Dave didn't prove his case well enough. In his defense, Dave claimed that his interactions with Ciccone were limited to public safety discussions, and that he had never cooperated with law enforcement in any shape or form. His wife later recanted her statements, admitting she made the allegations out of personal spite. Despite this, the Mongols expelled Santillan from the club in July 2021, citing the breach of trust and the potential damage to the organization's reputation. There were bigger issues, though. You see, as a result of the recording, the Mongols argued that Dave's alleged involvement as an informant had undermined their defense in the racketeering case. Dave claimed he never did such a thing, but the Mongols banked on the fact that he did. However, U.S. District Judge David O. Carter found no convincing evidence to support the claim that Dave had acted as an informant. He denied the request for a new trial, stating, "I don't find there's sufficient cooperation to merit overturning the conviction." You'd think that this would have been enough for the Mongols to welcome back Dave, but you'd be wrong. For one, the club's reputation had been hurt because of the allegations. For another, they'd just been slapped with a $500,000 fine because of the wiretapping too. As of now, Dave has not been charged or sentenced for any crimes related to the allegations of being a confidential informant. His current status within the biker community remains uncertain, and he has not publicly disclosed his activities following his expulsion from the Mongols. It's the greatest tale of going from the very top of the food chain to falling splat. Number 8. Donald Eugene Pop Chambers.
I got it. Oh, you got it? I got a cover K up. Get a shot of that! Hey, take a picture of that! Go, you can show what it's covering, go ahead. If I was a monkey, I could do it. All right, Bimbo! One time only. Can't you ever miss that and see the chrome primaries? Hold it, from this side. But you gotta get over here this time. Come on over here. If you want any more fish, you gotta catch it.
They called him Pop because he was the founder of the Bandidos, the worst outlaw biker gang to have ever come out of Texas. This is the story of Donald Eugene Chambers, better known in the outlaw community as Pop. To give you some background on the Bandidos first, the group rose to prominence in the United States around the late 60s. Today, they have over 2,500 members worldwide, in an estimated 22 nations across the world. This would mean that the Bandidos are currently the second largest outlaw gang in the world. Consequently, the United States Department of Justice has categorized the Bandidos as an organized crime network. What set Pop apart from other members of the outlaw community, however, was the fact that he was never ruthless without cause. As a Marine who'd served in the Vietnam War, Pop believed in fairness above all. If you did the right thing, you earned his respect. If you did the wrong thing, he wasn't about to let you off the hook, even if you begged for it. So shortly after returning home, Pop became a dock worker. That was where he met fellow bikers and joined a few small-time biker gangs. He eventually felt like something was missing, a lot more ruthlessness, and founded the Bandidos. Unlike other outlaw gangs across the United States at the time, membership in the Bandidos wasn't racially motivated. Anyone could join. In fact, the Bandidos were inspired by Mexican bandits. The club's colors, red and gold, were inspired by the colors of the United States Marine Corps. While anyone could join in theory, most people stayed as far away from Pop and his friends as they could. This meant that for the first few years of the Bandidos' operations, the gang almost exclusively had Vietnam War veterans as members. Pop first gained prominence in law enforcement agencies in the 70s, but not in the way you'd think. One day he showed up to the station with a bloodied and bruised member of the Bandidos, former member actually, and claimed that this was the man they'd been looking for. Pop had just turned on one of his own after the man had been found guilty of murder and had drawn unwanted attention to the Bandidos. This isn't to say that Pop didn't play a role in getting unwanted attention toward the group himself. In 1972, he orchestrated the execution of 2 drug dealers who were allegedly cheating the Bandidos by selling baking soda in place of methamphetamine. Instead of confronting the men with words or warnings, Pop lured them to a remote location under the pretense of a drug transaction. Once there, he and an accomplice shot the 2 men. The act was calculated and gruesome, a demonstration of what happened to anyone who crossed the bandidos. What made this act particularly gruesome was the fact that the two drug dealers, brothers Marley Leon Tarver and Preston LeRae Tarver, were forced to dig their own graves before being shot. The murders eventually caught the attention of law enforcement, and Pop was arrested and convicted of the slaying. He was sentenced to life in prison but served only a portion of that time before being paroled in 1983. Once he was released, Pop surprised everyone when he announced his retirement from the Bandidos, the club he'd founded in the first place. What happened from the time he held a gun to two men's heads and the time he was released? Well, while he was in prison, Pop found out that his 23-year-old son, Stephen Trammell Chambers, had just been shot. He ultimately passed away, and the person who was responsible for the murder was never caught. This affected Pop in ways no one could understand, and when he was paroled, Pop claimed that he was ready to turn over a new leaf. He never returned to the clubhouse, although he was welcome any time. Pop was still a respected former member of the biker gang, even if he wasn't an active participant in club activities anymore. Still, the violence he introduced into the culture of the Bandidos became part of their identity. The murder of the two drug dealers wasn't just a crime, it was a declaration of how the club would operate going forward. It sent a message not only to enemies and rivals, but also to members. Loyalty was everything, and betrayal could mean the worst. Number 7. Harry Joseph Taco Bowman.
Guy, probably the most violent international president that they ever had. And with violence comes respect. And he definitely was a guy that would go in and get his hands.
As the world's first biker businessman, Harry Joseph Taco Bowman has earned himself in the Biker Hall of Infamy. Known as Taco for his resemblance to someone of Hispanic origin, Harry Joseph was ironically anything but forthcoming toward immigrants. In fact, he'd hold meetings wearing a long black cape with a giant swastika on the back. Yes, Taco was a man of few words, but someone who'd always get the job done. How did the once bright kid from Michigan find himself on the FBI's most wanted list? Going back to his early childhood, Taco was raised in a mid-sized family in rural Marysville, Michigan. His parents were working class, but provided Taco and his siblings with the best upbringing they could. The kids all graduated from a Catholic school, with reports suggesting that Taco was a well-liked kid for the most part. Soon after, though, Taco found himself mixed up with the wrong crowd and joined the Devil's Disciples before patching over to the Outlaws. The Outlaws had gained prominence in the United States as one of the most ruthless biker gangs the country had ever seen. Moreover, they were known for the long-standing turf war against the Hells Angels. By the time Taco joined, the turf war was in full swing. If anything, President Harold Stairway Harry Henderson patched Taco and appointed him as the leader of the Detroit chapter because of his willingness to do anything for the Outlaws. Over the next several years, he did just that, and then some. It's hard to pinpoint when exactly Taco committed his first gruesome unaliving, but he had been the person of interest in a 1984 slaying of another outlaw member. If there was one thing that Taco disliked, it was disrespect. The member in question had reportedly run his mouth during a meeting, insulting a senior member. For that, Taco took him in his car and shot him execution style. The case remains unresolved, but everyone knows who did it. Anyway, after Henderson retired, Taco gained the opportunity to become the leader of the Outlaws. The gang had turned into a multi-million-dollar franchise by that point, and Taco had relocated his wife and 3 daughters to a posh suburb where his kids enrolled in a private school. Taco himself wasn't like other bikers in the community. While everyone else had rugged styles, Taco drove in a Cadillac, wearing a business suit, and would always have his hair slicked back. That's why he was referred to as the world's first biker businessman. That, and the fact that he was charismatic enough to form multiple alliances that made profit for the Outlaws. At one point, the Outlaws controlled all of Detroit's drug trade and topless bars. Taco was getting used to the finer things in life, and he wasn't about to stop anytime soon. He even managed to unify several minor gangs together and crossed international waters to join together with other biker gangs. The Outlaws' closest allies would have to be Canada's Satan's Choice. In exchange for a chunk of their drug trade, the Outlaws agreed to smuggle guns and ammunition into Canada for them. The one gang that the Outlaws couldn't charm or intimidate was the Hells Angels. This was back when Sonny Barger was the club's president, and the two men reportedly hated one another. Besides ordering the slayings of several of their men and vice versa, the Hells Angels and Outlaws were in a full-blown war with one another. Many hits were placed on Barger, and just as many were placed on Taco's life. In the end, however, Taco didn't go out in a big bang like he'd hoped. If anything, he passed away from cancer while rotting in a prison cell. What led to this point? You see, Taco had everything. He had a foot in the biker world and another in the business realm. He had all the money he could have ever hoped for and was making more every day. He also held control of several illegal operations across the nation. What Taco didn't have, however, were people he could trust. When the feds threatened two of the Outlaws' most prominent members with a possible life sentence for a slew of crimes, they immediately turned on their former boss. The men were Wayne Hicks and Houston Murphy, two of Taco's most trusted associates. With their testimonies, it was clear that Taco would be locked up for the rest of his life. But this was a man who lived life by his own rules, and he wasn't about to go down without a fight. For over 18 months, the feds spent hundreds and thousands of dollars in their pursuit of Taco, who seemed to have just vanished into thin air. You see, despite loving the finer things in life, Taco wasn't someone who enjoyed being seen in the spotlight. His low profile had helped him evade arrest for over a year until he was finally apprehended in the spring of 1999 and sentenced to life in prison. The leader of the Outlaws passed away from cancer at the Federal Medical Center in Butner, North Carolina, on March 3, 2019, at the age of 69. Reportedly, his funeral was attended by over 2,500 people, members of the Outlaws, crime bosses, and everyone in between. Number 6. Walter Stadnick. You'd be surprised to know that despite being one of the most notorious members of the Hells Angels, not much is actually known about Walter Stadnick. In 2025, the leader of the Ontario chapter of the Hells Angels turned 72, and while he's officially retired, he remains a member in day-to-day operations. No one knows much about Stadnick, and it's always baffled law enforcement agencies how an Anglo-Canadian managed to rise through the ranks in a largely French-Canadian Hells Angels. In fact, people still don't know why he was called Nurget, or what that even means. The Crown tried for decades to lock him up for good, but was never successful. Born in Hamilton, Ontario in 1952, Stadnick's early life gave little indication of the criminal notoriety he would later achieve. He grew up in a working-class neighborhood and was described as intelligent, articulate, and relatively quiet. As a teenager, he developed a fascination with motorcycles and the rebellious culture that surrounded them. This fascination eventually led him down a path into the outlaw biker underworld. At school, Stadnick was a low-level drug dealer, and some believed that his nickname stemmed from that time since he would always sell a nugget of drugs. In any case, the drug-dealing teen had more than a few run-ins with the law, but always made it out. He joined a low-level biker group known as the Cossacks, a reference to his Ukrainian heritage, before moving up to the Wild Ones and eventually the Hells Angels. You'd be shocked to know that Stadnick actually wanted to join the Hells Angels' counterpart and rivals, Satan's Choice. Why didn't he get an opportunity to join? Another enigma in Stadnick's tale is the fact that he was shorter than most members. Standing at only 5'4", Stadnick was denied membership into Satan's Choice for being too short. He was also known for never doing drugs and only occasionally drinking. Stadnick's turning point came in 1982, when he joined the Hells Angels after they expanded into Canada through their violent absorption of the Popeye Moto Club in Quebec. He was among the first members from outside Quebec to be accepted into the Hells Angels, a sign of both his ambition and strategic value. He quickly rose through the ranks, known not for his brutality, but for his brains. Stadnick stood out because he was unusually calculating and low profile compared to other members. His calm demeanor and businesslike approach made him especially effective at long-term planning and negotiation, key traits that would define his leadership style. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Walter Stadnick quietly worked behind the scenes to bring unity to Canada's scattered biker gangs under the Hells Angels banner. At the time, the biker scene was divided, with strong regional clubs like Satan's Choice, the Outlaws, and the Rock Machine competing for turf and influence. Stadnik recognized that if these groups could be consolidated, the Hells Angels could grow into a dominant national force. He led recruitment drives, brokered club mergers, and in some cases relied on violence and intimidation to convince smaller groups to join or step aside. One of his most active periods was during the Quebec Biker War from 1994 to 2002. This was a violent and deadly battle between the Hells Angels and the Rock Machine over control of drug trafficking routes and street-level drug sales. Though Stadnik wasn't usually involved in the fighting, he played a major role in the background. He helped keep the club organized across provinces and worked to ensure that the Hells Angels' influence kept spreading, even during the conflict. By the end of the 1990s, he had effectively become the national leader of the Hells Angels in Canada. Stadnik's main criminal activities included drug trafficking, especially meth and cocaine, along with extortion and coordinating other forms of organized crime. After years of police surveillance and investigation, he was finally arrested in 2001. In 2004, he was convicted on several serious charges, including gangsterism and conspiracy to commit murder, and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Despite his soft-spoken and low-key public image, Stadnik left a massive impact, transforming the Hells Angels into a tightly run criminal empire stretching across Canada. Number 5. Ruben Doc Cavazos.
Doc continued to expand the club. He continued to recruit new members, so infiltrating the Mongols Motorcycle Club was easy because the Mongols were looking for new members.
They called him Doc because at one point, Ruben Cavazos was on his way to becoming a radiology technician. How did he go from living a life as an otherwise ordinary working man to becoming one of the most infamous members in history? Doc was raised by his father, a Mexican immigrant in California. He had an otherwise normal childhood, although the family reportedly didn't have a lot to go by. Not much is known about Doc's early life and childhood, or even how he got mixed up in the biker world. What we do know, however, is that he joined the Mongols sometime in the 90s. At the time, Doc had a fascination with bikes and was a low-level tough guy at most, but far from being anyone law enforcement would consider a threat. This changed once he became national president, of course. Doc rose through the ranks in no time and managed to ascend to power in the gang. During his presidency, the Mongols were heavily involved in organized crime, particularly drug trafficking, illegal weapons distribution, assault, extortion, and murder. Club members, with Doc allegedly at the helm, were tied to widespread methamphetamine and cocaine operations across several states. Violence became a regular feature, with Mongols implicated in brawls, shootings, and targeted slayings. As national president, Doc was not only aware of these activities, but was also accused of facilitating and profiting from them. The Mongols were thriving, yes, but this didn't mean that Doc was particularly well liked by everyone. Because of his need for more and more control, Doc began associating the Mongols with Mexican street criminals. This was something that veteran members refused to accept. They argued that the Mongols were meant to be exclusively biker-related and didn't appreciate the unwanted attention Doc was bringing in. Consequently, in the early 2000s, he was expelled from the biker group. While the Mongols wiped their hands clean of Doc, the feds were still on his trail for drug-related and racketeering charges. In what was known as Operation Black Rain, Doc and 37 other Mongols were arrested by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives after an investigation into the club. The operation revealed just how entrenched the criminal activities had become under his leadership. Facing overwhelming evidence, Doc pleaded guilty to racketeering conspiracy, admitting to his role in the club's illegal enterprises. Following his arrest and guilty plea, he authored a book, Honor Few, Fear None: The Life and Times of a Mongol. This further alienated him from the biker community, as it detailed club secrets and cast him in a favorable light. While Doc may have envisioned himself as a transformative leader, his tenure is widely seen as a period of both expansion and downfall for the Mongols. Number 4. Jeffrey Pike.
Notorious motorcycle club leader Jeffrey Pike just appeared in front of a judge on several charges, and we've learned he allegedly called for members to commit murder.
And now let's talk about a man whose reign of terror came to a startling end. There was a time in Jeffrey Fay Pike's life when he thoroughly believed that he was untouchable. As the national president of the Bandidos, Jeffrey had all the money and manpower he needed to stay in power. As such, Pike rose through the world of outlaw biking to become one of the most controversial figures in history. But what might come as a surprise to many is that Pike wasn't the sort to socialize. You'd rarely, if ever, see him at meetings. He wasn't one to negotiate with other gangs either, and altogether, Pike seemed to keep to himself. Maybe that's what helped him evade law agencies' interest for the longest time, too. Pike was born in the mid-1950s and grew up in a working-class environment in the suburbs of Houston. Like many drawn to outlaw biker culture, his early years were shaped by a mix of rebellion, blue-collar hardship, and a fascination with brotherhoods that stood apart from mainstream society. By the time he reached adulthood, Pike had developed an affinity for motorcycles and the outlaw lifestyle that came with them. His entry into the Bandidos is believed to have occurred in the 1980s, at a time when the club was expanding its influence across Texas and beginning to clash with rival gangs such as the Hells Angels. With the Bandidos, Pike showed his determination and discipline. The latter wouldn't be something you'd typically expect from a biker, but Pike was different, and that was the reason why he managed to become president eventually. You see, while the other members occupied their time with women or booze, Pike was more calculated and operated like this was the corporate world, and he had to get to the top-floor office somehow. His ability to stay under the radar, avoid unnecessary public attention, and maintain order within the organization set him apart. By the early 2000s, Pike had risen through the ranks to become the national president of the Bandidos. In this role, he held authority over chapters across the United States and had influence over Bandidos operations internationally. By the time law enforcement agencies started noticing him, it was already too late. Under Pike's leadership, the Bandidos had something they'd never been able to achieve: structure. Pike made sure that all of the gang's operations were controlled without any unnecessary attention. He was instrumental in directing various illegal enterprises, including drug trafficking, extortion, firearms sales, and violent retaliation against rival clubs and perceived enemies. One of his most infamous policies involved issuing orders for the elimination of members who were disloyal or posed a risk to the organization's secrecy. In 2016, a lengthy federal investigation culminated in the indictment of Pike and several other high-ranking Bandidos members. He was charged with several crimes, including racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, drug trafficking, and obstruction of justice. Prosecutors claimed that the Bandidos had stopped operating like a biker club and were now similar to a mafia family, complete with internal discipline, codes of silence, and deadly enforcement tactics. In 2018, Pike was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life in federal prison. Number 3. George Christie.
We've got a faction of law enforcement that knows they've got to use me to get in there, otherwise they're going to have a full-on gun battle. Then you've got the SWAT guys thinking, the hell with that, you know, we outgun these guys, let's just take over. I wound up becoming a negotiator for the club and for the cops.
George Christie. The name rings a bell, doesn't it? He is, after all, one of the most prominent men in recent times. Christie's an author, a celebrity, and most importantly, he's been the longest-serving president of the Hells Angels in history. That's right, Christie was the leader of the California chapter from 1978 until 2011, and he claims to have links to the notorious gang to this day. The fact that Christie's found his way on this list proves that he's more than just the old man we see on the internet. There's a lot of history to be told here, some of which isn't all that pretty. Starting with his early childhood, and if we were to describe it in a word, it'd be boring. Born to Greek immigrant parents, Christie had a normal upbringing and was well liked. By his own admission, he was raised with gentleness and love. He was also very timid as a child and only started rebelling once he graduated from high school. Christie was associated with 2 biker gangs during his youth, the Question Marks and Satan's Slaves. Despite the fact that he was a biker with a Harley-Davidson, tattoos, and everything to match, Christie was also a college graduate. Probably one of the very few members of the Angels who actually went ahead and got a college degree. Christie wasn't like other members of the Hells Angels, and initially claimed that he had only joined the gang because of its commitment to brotherhood. Christie was instrumental in changing the image of the Hells Angels, but law enforcement agencies still treated him as a suspect. Sure enough, Christie was found to have been instrumental in starting the bike war between the Hells Angels and the Mongols in the 1970s. This would ultimately become one of the worst turf wars in biker history. In 1986, Christie was implicated in a federal sting operation involving a plot to murder a former Hells Angels member turned informant. Although he was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder, Christie was acquitted in 1987 after a jury trial. In the late 1990s, Christie faced a series of legal troubles. Authorities investigated him for drug trafficking, tax evasion, and money laundering. In 2001, he was arrested and charged with multiple offenses, including conspiracy to possess Vicodin with intent to distribute. He pleaded guilty in 2002 and was sentenced to 390 days in jail, receiving credit for time served. In 2008, Christie pleaded guilty to possession of cocaine and methamphetamine, resulting in 8 months of probation. In 2011, Christie retired from the Hells Angels. Later that year, he was arrested and charged with orchestrating the bombings of 2 rival tattoo shops. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to interfere with commerce and was sentenced to 10 months in federal prison, which he served in Texas. Following his release, Christie transitioned into writing and media. He authored several books, including Exile on Front Street, Marked, and Outlaw: Riding Through the Storm, detailing his experiences within the Hells Angels. Christie also ventured into television, hosting the History Channel's Outlaw Chronicles, where he discussed the inner workings of outlaw biker culture. Currently, Christie serves as a consultant for defense attorneys and media outlets, offering insights into motorcycle club dynamics and criminal justice. He also works with first-time offenders to help them navigate the legal system. Christie resides in Southern California with his family. Number 2. Justin DiLoretto.
The Mongols have bylaws and a constitution, so the chapter sometimes has their individual rules and then the national rules, which is the constitution. So like everyone had to be at the weekly meetings and everyone had to pay their chapter dues. You know, there was a national rule that no one could sell drugs within the club. In my regions, you weren't allowed to use methamphetamines. You couldn't ever do something that would put a member in jeopardy.
The world knows Justin DiLoretto today as one of the most infamous members of the Mongols. But that's purely because of the book he authored himself. That's right. Justin left the Mongols several years ago and has since talked about his experiences as an outlaw biker. Some of those experiences are ruthless, bloody, and enough to send a shiver down your spine. Also known as Mooch, Justin's journey is inspirational in the outlaw community, considering he started as a low-level thug for street gangs and eventually became a senior member of the Mongols. He would stay committed to the biker gang for the next decade or so, before eventually announcing his retirement. Not before leaving a bloody mark, though. Things were tough for Justin while growing up, and it came as a surprise to no one when it was revealed that he was involved with local street gangs. Eventually, Justin joined 2 gangs, the Rose City Bova Boys and the Capital City Hooligans. While the police were irked by their activities, they weren't anything major. For the most part, Justin and his associates would commit petty crimes and sell a few bucks of drugs here and there. But this was obviously just the first step for Justin. Once he outgrew the local gangs, Justin started searching for more dangerous groups to join. This was what led him to join the Mongols MC. His commitment and leadership qualities led him to serve as a chapter president for 15 years across various states, including Oregon, Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. During his time with the Mongols, Justin was involved in activities that brought him into conflict with the law. In 2008, he was convicted of menacing, reckless endangerment, and reckless driving, resulting in a jail sentence. Additionally, he had prior convictions for assault related to gang activities. These legal issues highlighted the violent and unlawful aspects of his life within the motorcycle club. Ultimately, Justin decided that it was best to leave the club because of the negative attention he'd started to receive. He chose to leave the club out bad, a term indicating a departure under unfavorable circumstances, often due to conflicts or breaches of club rules. Today, the former member of the Mongols is an author, YouTube creator, and social worker dedicated to sharing his experiences to educate others. His autobiography, The Ride of My Life, delves into his journey through gang affiliations, leadership within the Mongols MC, and his subsequent transformation. Through public speaking and media appearances, he offers insights into the inner workings of outlaw motorcycle clubs and advocates for positive change. 1. John Portillo. Closing this list with none other than John Portillo, one of the most recent members of a notorious motorcycle gang to find his way behind bars for a long time. Portillo was once the most feared man in Texas because of his affiliation with the Bandidos. He'd risen through the organization's ranks to become national vice president and made sure that everyone knew the Bandidos were not to be messed with. You can pretty much guess that his reign was marked with nothing but violence, threats, and intimidation. The only three ways Portillo knew to ensure he held control. Born and raised in San Antonio, Texas, Portillo's early life set the stage for his future involvement with outlaw motorcycle clubs. While specific details about his childhood aren't readily available to the public, his immersion in the local biker culture eventually led him to join the Bandidos Motorcycle Club, a group known for its strict hierarchy and code of conduct. It'd be fair to say that Portillo didn't grow up in the best environment and likely dropped out of school at a young age because of his rebellious nature. He wasn't one to sit around and wait for a typical 9-to-5. He wanted more. Shortly after joining the group sometime in the late 90s or early 2000s, Portillo was bumped up to the position of Sergeant-at-Arms in the San Antonio chapter of the Mongols. This role entrusted him with the responsibility of protecting national officers and managing relationships between local chapters and rival clubs. His effectiveness in this position led to his appointment as National Vice President, or El Vicepresidente, in 2013. This was also when he met another prominent member of the Bandidos, someone we've already discussed here today, Jeffrey Fay Pike. Portillo's work was essentially to make sure that Pike was kept protected and helped him avoid unnecessary attention. Besides being an enforcer, which meant that Portillo was muscle for the Bandidos, his quick thinking earned him a special role as a key advisor. No wonder he was made vice president in no time. Under Pike and Portillo, the Bandidos expanded their influence, both geographically and in terms of criminal enterprises. The duo orchestrated a range of illegal activities, including drug trafficking, extortion, and violent assaults. Portillo played a central role in these operations, directing and sanctioning actions that reinforced the club's dominance. Portillo had a big impact on how the Bandidos operated. He set things up so that only certain people knew specific information, which helped keep the top leaders out of legal trouble. This approach also made it easier to manage the gang's criminal activities in different parts of the country. While he helped the Bandidos grow stronger and more feared, his arrest and life sentence ended up dealing a major blow to the group's leadership. Police had already been on their tail, but they recognized how big of a force the Bandidos truly were in 2006 after the slaying of Anthony Benesch. Benesch was a member of the Hells Angels who'd reportedly been trying to set up a Texas chapter. If you know anything about the biker community, it's that you cannot set up shop where another gang already exists. Pop had already started the Bandidos in Texas sometime in the late 60s, and the Lone Star State was largely considered their area. The last thing the Bandidos would ever do is relinquish control to the Hells Angels. Evidence presented during Portillo's trial indicated that he and Pike ordered Benesch's assassination to prevent the expansion of the Hells Angels into Bandidos territory. Additionally, Portillo was implicated in the 2002 slaying of Robert Lara, carried out in retaliation for the unaliving of Bandidos member Javier Negrete. Testimony revealed that Portillo instructed fellow members to take care of Lara, leading to his execution-style passing. Portillo's criminal activities also extended to drug trafficking, where he oversaw the distribution of several hard drugs. He also negotiated an agreement with the Texas Mexican Mafia, allowing Bandidos members to traffic narcotics without paying the customary dime, or 10% tax, to the Mafia. In 2016, federal agents arrested Portillo during a major investigation into the Bandidos' criminal activity. After a trial that lasted almost 3 months, a jury found both Portillo and Pike guilty of several serious charges, like racketeering, planning murders, and drug trafficking. On September 24, 2018, Portillo was given 2 life sentences plus 20 more years.
Rumors about a motorcycle club coming to the city.
And it sure doesn't make you a member of the Hells Angels.
Was filled with hundreds of motorcycles that belong to Hells Angels members.
The Hells Angels are feared across 32 countries with a long legacy of loyalty, mystery, and defiance. Leaving the club is tougher than earning a spot in it. But are they constantly charging from one turf war to the next? Or is there more to their life that we don't know? From grueling years-long vetting to a strict code of silence with law enforcement, here's what a day in the life of a Hells Angel looks like. The birth of the Hells Angels. The Hells Angels Motorcycle Club kicked off over 70 years ago in the USA as a bold response to the snobby motorcycle clubs that catered only to the elite. These bikers wanted to create a club for the everyday guy, especially the ex-soldiers craving the camaraderie they felt during World War II. To this day, that spirit of brotherhood and unity is alive and kicking in the Hells Angels. These riders hit the open road for thrilling rides, throw epic parties, and gather at their clubhouses for unforgettable nights of laughter and stories. But don't let the fun fool you. The Hells Angels run like a well-oiled machine, with a solid hierarchy that keeps everything in check. Life as a Hells Angels member comes with its own set of responsibilities, all shaped by their rank in the club. One crucial thing to know is that you can't just waltz up to your local Hells Angels chapter and score a VIP pass. These bikers are all about exclusivity and only let in those who truly measure up to their high standards. Joining the Hells Angels isn't just a casual stroll. It's more like navigating an intense obstacle course where only the most worthy get to ride with them. Before you even dream of a full membership, you've got to build solid bonds with the existing members. It's all about earning their trust, which means you'll be under close watch for a good while. They're looking for qualities like resilience, maturity, and rock-solid discipline. On top of that, they also require you to have a valid driver's license, a motorcycle with over 750cc of power, and the right personal vibe. Oh, and the club has a zero tolerance for child molesters or anyone who's tried to become a cop or prison officer ever. After that grueling selection process, once you're chosen as a candidate, welcome to the hang-around status for about 3 months. This is your chance to dive into the club's world. You may not have full membership rights yet, but you can soak up the atmosphere and get a taste of the action. During this phase, you'll be rolling up your sleeves and taking on humble tasks like cleaning the clubhouse and refueling the bikes of the seasoned members. It's all part of showing your dedication and proving you're ready to level up to the next stage. Prospects. Prospects in the Hells Angels are like probationary members going through a year-long assessment to prove they're worthy of full membership. They can join in on group motorcycle tours and club events, but they're still at the bottom of the hierarchy compared to the seasoned members. This is a significant time for personal growth and bonding with the crew as prospects learn how to represent the club's values to the outside world. Only after mastering the rules and showing their true grit can they climb up to the coveted title of a full member. But hold on, there are some surprising rules within the Hells Angels that might catch you off guard. For starters, most members aren't allowed to drink alcohol, with only a few exceptions, and drug use is a big no-no. Now, let's be real. While that's the rule, we all know that things can get a little loose when the party starts. Plus, strict guidelines mean members must steer clear of the police, no matter what trouble they find themselves in. Plus, working with law enforcement is absolutely off limits. These principles are the backbone of the club, and they stand strong on the streets. Now, you might be wondering what it's really like to be a full-fledged member of the Hells Angels. Surprisingly, in most chapters, everyday life is not quite what you see in the documentaries and sensational reports. While the Hells Angels have a reputation for being involved in criminal activities, the heart of the organization is all about community. Members come together to build strong bonds, support one another, and engage in charitable activities that give back to their communities. It's not just about the wild rides and tough guy image, it's about creating a brotherhood where camaraderie thrives. So, beneath the leather jackets and roaring engines, you'll discover a dedicated group that values connection, loyalty, and helping those around them. One shining example of the Hells Angels' compassion happened 6 years ago when tragedy struck. A young boy named Jaden, just 9 years old, lost his life in a rampage. 1,000 Hells Angels attended his funeral. Jaden was the stepson of a Bandidos member, a gang that the Hells Angels had a long and rocky rivalry with. However, at this moment, the Hells Angels set aside their ongoing rivalry to stand in solidarity with their fellow bikers. What's even more interesting is that their goodwill doesn't stop there. The club often organizes charity rides where both members and sponsors pitch in fees that go to worthy causes. However, it's not always easy to find groups willing to accept donations from the Hells Angels. Some organizations hesitate due to reports of questionable activities from certain chapters. Zazra Zagarin, a former Hells Angels member who ditched the gang in Berlin, spilled some serious tea in an interview released in 2022. He dropped the bomb that some chapters are more like mafia gangs than motorcycle clubs. Zagarin, who originally joined while working security, got tangled up in some wild stuff. He confessed to being part of a robbery at a betting office with 11 other Hells Angels in 2019. The robbery turned deadly when a security guard was shot and unalived during the crime. After that, he decided enough was enough, cut ties with his former crew, and is now living in witness protection. But this saga of death and violence doesn't end there. You see, rival motorcycle gangs are a big part of life in the Hells Angels. Sometimes, confrontations with them can get seriously intense, even leading to kidnappings or straight-up assaults. A former member shared that it wasn't unusual for criminal elements within the Hells Angels to launch all-out raids on rival clubhouses, tearing them apart to settle scores. However, it would be unfair to put every single Hells Angels in the same box. Each chapter operates independently, and many Hells Angels members are peaceful folks who join for the sense of camaraderie and community, not chaos. Unfortunately, the negative press has ramped up law enforcement's focus on the Hells Angels. This means that members often find themselves dealing with police searches, seizures, and even raids in their daily lives. The cops have plenty of reason to be on high alert. The issues aren't just small time. Your mind might go straight to drug sales, but they're just the tip of the iceberg. In more extreme cases, shootouts erupt as some Hells Angels chapters clash with rival gangs for control of red light districts and nightlife hotspots. Despite multiple attempts, authorities still can't seem to nail down a comprehensive ban on the Hells Angels. One of the main reasons for this is that not every chapter of this biker club is up to no good, and many members have nothing to do with illegal activities at all. This makes things even trickier for law enforcement because the shady chapters often put on a convincing front. They might operate registered bars, discos, security services, brothels, or tattoo shops, complete with tax payments and compliance with regulations. But behind the scenes, that's where the real action happens, hiding from the prying eyes of outsiders and even the law. In the biker world, it's considered a serious crime to snitch. The inside scoop on these operations often comes from defectors who bravely step forward, risking everything to share what they know. The real kicker is that the Hells Angels have bounties as high as €500,000 on whistleblowers, making it clear that they want traitors silenced. Back in 2023, Frank Hannebuth, the former head honcho of the German Hells Angels, made headlines when he stood trial for his crimes in Mallorca. This wasn't just any trial. It was the aftermath of a jaw-dropping police raid that even called in the helicopters on his German estate. Halbach, who thought he could ride out on his holiday island, was eventually arrested and charged with coercion and forced sex work. He was once the big cheese for the Hells Angels in Spain, and for years, he ruled as one of the most powerful figures in the European Hells Angels scene, running a network of brothels, dance clubs, and cinemas across Germany. At times, he even had a decent reputation in the media, seen as a respectable member of the Brotherhood.
It wasn't as long as we had thought it might go on. Police were definitely prepared as the Hells Angels and their associates.
Behind bars where violence rules and weakness means death, these women's name echoes through cold concrete hallways, striking fear into the hearts of inmates and guards alike. They didn't born into the notorious Hells Angels. They fought their way in, leaving a trail of blood and broken bodies. Now, even locked in maximum security, her power reaches beyond prison walls. Discover how this ruthless biker queen built an empire of terror that makes hardened criminals tremble at the mere whisper of her name. Number 10. Sandy the Serpent Sullivan. In the mean streets of Los Angeles, where danger lurks around every corner, a formidable figure emerged from the shadows, Sandy the Serpent Sullivan. Her name alone was enough to make rival gang members and law enforcement officers alike feel a chill down their spines. Sandy wasn't just any Hell's Angel. She was born into this life, making her journey into the Brotherhood almost inevitable. Sandy's father, a skilled mechanic and former Hell's Angel himself, rode alongside her two brothers in the club. This early exposure to the biker lifestyle meant Sandy was breathing in the culture of rebellion, brotherhood, and freedom from her very first days. The rough conditions of her upbringing forged her into someone determined, unwavering, and constantly ready to prove her worth whenever challenged. Before she even knew how to ride, the qualities needed to become one of the most dangerous women in the Hells Angels were already pumping through her veins. As a young girl, Sandy would sit cross-legged on the garage floor, completely absorbed in her father's stories of brotherhood and rebellion, of the freedom found on the open road, and tales of the fearsome reputation the Hells Angels had built for themselves. Her eyes would light up when he described high-speed chases and territorial battles, her young mind already mapping out how she would one day join these ranks and create her own legacy. Though she had to wait until she turned 18 to officially become a member, Sandy's path was already clear to everyone who knew her. Breaking into the male-dominated world of Hells Angels wasn't easy, even with her family connections. She faced constant scrutiny and had to work twice as hard to prove herself worthy of the patch she wore so proudly on her leather jacket. Sandy navigated the dangerous streets of Los Angeles with fierce determination, truly embodying the spirit of rebellion and freedom that the Hells Angels symbolized. What truly set Sandy apart wasn't just her fearless nature or her childhood exposure to the club. It was her ruthlessness. She played by her own rules, showing a level of defiance that impressed even the most hardened members. Through grit and unwavering loyalty to the club, Sandy quickly earned respect among her peers. Riding with her long black hair flowing behind her, she commanded attention wherever she went. Her very presence was a testament to the resilience of women who dared to claim their place in this notoriously masculine world. To Sandy, the Hells Angels weren't just a club. They were family with unique values and beliefs that outsiders could never truly understand. Adapting to their lifestyle came naturally to her, though she constantly faced scrutiny from those who questioned whether a woman could truly embody the Hells Angels' spirit. Yet she remained undeterred, fighting alongside her brothers, proving repeatedly that her passion and loyalty knew no bounds. Her nickname, the Serpent, wasn't given lightly. Sandy earned this title through her cunning nature and ability to strike swiftly without warning. She was a master manipulator whose words could be as deadly and venomous as a serpent's bite. Like a snake waiting in the grass, Sandy could see weaknesses in others and exploit them to her advantage. She knew when to strike and when to lie in wait, making her unpredictable and dangerous in ways that brute strength could never match. One of Sandy's most legendary moments came during a territorial dispute with the rival Mongols gang. During this tense period, both gangs were on edge, and bloodshed seemed inevitable. Tempers were flaring, and many Hells Angels were preparing for an all-out war that would likely leave bodies on both sides. Yet Sandy proved her exceptional value to the club by defusing the situation without a single shot being fired. Using her sharp intelligence and manipulative skills, she exploited internal conflicts within the Mongols, turning key members against each other. Through carefully planted rumors and strategic conversations, Sandy created such discord within the rival gang that they were too busy with their own internal problems to focus on the territorial dispute with the Hells Angels. Through this cunning strategy, Sandy claimed the disputed territory without spilling a drop of blood, a rare feat in the violent world of motorcycle gangs and one that earned her tremendous respect. Sandy the Serpent, Sullivan's time with the Hells Angels wasn't without controversy. There were whispers of intimidation, extortion, and even murder connected to her name, though nothing was ever proven. Like a true serpent, Sandy was elusive, always staying one step ahead of those trying to catch her. Law enforcement attempted countless times to build cases against her, but witnesses would mysteriously recant their statements and evidence would disappear before charges could be filed. She became a legend within the club, a symbol of the unbreakable spirit of women who dare to ride against society's expectations. Sandy's story demonstrates that true power doesn't always come from physical strength, but sometimes from a mind sharp enough to outthink opponents and a will strong enough to never back down. As Sandy the Serpent Sullivan slithered her way through the dangerous world of the Hells Angels with her cunning mind and manipulative skills, another female member, Rosie Road Rage Ramirez, was making waves with a completely different approach. Where Sandy was calculating and patient, our next dangerous Hells Angel was all about explosive power and unstoppable rage. Number 9. Rosie Road Rage Ramirez. Born and raised in the tough neighborhoods of Arizona, Rosie Road Rage Ramirez might never have developed her fiery temperament and unbridled courage if not for her difficult upbringing. Growing up surrounded by violence and hardship, Rosie had to develop thick skin and an explosive personality just to survive. While Sandy learned manipulation and cunning from her father's stories, Rosie learned to fight from necessity, and it showed in everything she did as a Hells Angel. From an early age, Rosie found her escape and sense of belonging on the back of a motorcycle. The feeling of freedom that came with riding down desert roads with nothing but open sky above her was intoxicating, a brief escape from the harsh realities of her daily life. This early exposure to motorcycle culture made her a natural fit for the Hells Angels later in life, though her path to joining would be paved with challenges. Rosie's natural energy and persistence made her a figure to fear, but that wasn't enough to give her easy access to the male-dominated Hells Angels. Her transition into the club came with tremendous challenges, as many male members questioned whether a woman, especially one with Rosie's explosive temper, could truly embody the Hells Angels spirit. But Rosie wasn't deterred. She earned her position as a formidable force within the club through her reputation for intense combat skills and unwavering determination in the face of adversity. What truly set Rosie apart and earned her the nickname Road Rage was her explosive temper. When provoked, her anger erupted like a volcano, making her a terrifying opponent both on and off her motorcycle. Rosie was a fearless and reckless rider, pushing her bike to limits that made even veteran Hells Angels nervous. But her skills weren't limited to riding. Rosie was equally dangerous off the bike, using her fists to intimidate rival gang members who dared to cross her path. Her relentless spirit instilled fear in those who dared to cross her or the Hells Angels. Rosie wasn't just a member, she became the voice of the club, using her sharp and impactful words to strike fear into the hearts of adversaries. When Rosie spoke, people listened, not just because of what she said, but because of the implied threat behind every word. Everyone knew that Rosie didn't make empty threats. She made promises that she was more than willing to keep. Because of her abilities and reputation, Rosie often found herself in life-threatening situations. One particularly notorious incident occurred during a clash with a rival gang that had been encroaching on Hells Angels territory. During this confrontation, Rosie and her fellow Hells Angels found themselves severely outnumbered. Most would have retreated, lived to fight another day when the odds were better. Instead of backing down, she charged headfirst into battle, fighting with such brutal efficiency that she stunned both enemies and allies alike. Her bravery inspired her fellow Hells Angels to follow her lead, turning what should have been a defeat into an unlikely victory. After that day, no one in the club questioned Rosie's place among them. She had proven herself not just equal, but often superior to her male counterparts when it came to courage and fighting spirit. Rosie's aggressive nature and unpredictable temper were valuable assets to the Hells Angels, but these same traits also put her firmly in the crosshairs of law enforcement. She quickly became one of the most wanted Hells Angels members, finding herself in frequent confrontations with authorities. Yet her exceptional riding skills made it nearly impossible for law enforcement to catch up during high-speed pursuits. She knew every backroad and hidden path in her territory, disappearing like a ghost whenever police gave chase. Despite constant encounters with the law, Rosie remained unshaken and refused to be intimidated or controlled by authorities. Her defiance against societal norms only elevated her status within the Hells Angels. She became a symbol of rebellion, inspiring both fear and admiration among those who knew her name or had witnessed her in action. What made Rosie truly dangerous wasn't just her fighting ability or riding skills, it was her absolute refusal to back down from any challenge. Whether facing rival gangs, law enforcement, or even conflicts within the club itself, she met every obstacle head-on with the same fiery determination that earned her the Road Rage moniker. Her life was defined by this refusal to submit, making her not just respected but genuinely feared by enemies of the Hells Angels. Rosie built her reputation through raw power and an explosive temper. Our next dangerous female Hells Angel took a completely different approach to earning her place in the Brotherhood. Where Rosie relied on her fists and fury, our next member, Lisa Byfield, used her mind and mechanical prowess to become indispensable to the club. Number 8. Lisa Byfield. Deep within the concrete walls of the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California, a legend walks among the general population. Lisa Byfield, once a proud member of the Hells Angels, now rules the prison yard with the same fierce determination that made her infamous on the outside. Her story begins not in the club itself, but as the wife of a high-ranking Hells Angels member in Washington state. Unlike many old ladies who stayed in the background, Lisa refused to be just someone's woman. She demanded respect in her own right. Lisa's journey into the Hells Angels wasn't through family connections like Sandy the Serpent Sullivan or through mechanical skills like Lena Lethal Lawson. Instead, she carved her path through unwavering loyalty and a shocking willingness to do whatever was necessary for the club. This dedication caught the attention of senior members, who soon realized Lisa was more valuable as an active participant than as just a supporter. What truly set Lisa apart was her complete fearlessness when it came to violence. While most would hesitate before committing serious crimes, Lisa approached such tasks with an almost unnerving calmness. Law enforcement officials who later investigated her case were shocked by her detailed planning and execution of various criminal enterprises on behalf of the Hells Angels. Her downfall came during a massive federal operation targeting the Hells Angels drug distribution network. When agents closed in, Lisa didn't surrender quietly like some members did. She engaged in a shootout with federal agents that left 2 wounded before she was finally subdued. This final act of defiance only added to her growing legend within the outlaw biker community. Inside prison, Lisa quickly established herself as a force to be reckoned with. New inmates learn within days that crossing her means severe consequences. She brought the Hells Angels organizational structure into the prison system, creating a network of loyal followers who carry out her orders without question. Guards have found themselves unable to break her influence, even after multiple transfers to different facilities. What makes Lisa truly dangerous isn't just her personal capacity for violence, it's her ability to command respect and obedience from others. She's created a prison economy that rivals the official system, controlling the flow of contraband with ruthless efficiency. Inmates who attempt to operate independently soon find themselves faced with brutal consequences orchestrated by Lisa's network. Despite being locked away, Lisa maintains connections to the Hells Angels on the outside. Messages flow in and out through a sophisticated system of communication that prison officials have struggled to disrupt. Her influence extends beyond the walls, with her name still mentioned in hushed tones at Hells Angels gatherings. Former members speak of her ability to run operations from behind bars as if she were still riding free. What frightens prison officials most is Lisa's patience and intelligence. Unlike other influential inmates who flaunt their power, Lisa operates with careful precision. She plans months or even years ahead, manipulating the system to her advantage. Several guards have been dismissed after investigations revealed they had been compromised by her network, either through bribery or blackmail. Even as she serves her 25-year sentence, Lisa's legend continues to grow. Younger female inmates drawn to her power seek her approval, creating a new generation of loyal followers. Prison psychologists have noted her remarkable ability to identify vulnerable inmates and bring them under her control, offering protection in exchange for absolute loyalty. Law enforcement agencies studying prison gang activities have created entire profiles dedicated to understanding Lisa's methods. Her ability to maintain control without directly connecting herself to incidents has frustrated attempts to add time to her sentence or restrict her privileges. She's mastered the art of being everyone's suspect, but no one's proven perpetrator. As Lisa the Iron Fist Byfield continues her reign as the most feared Hells Angels woman in US prison, her story serves as a dark reminder that the indomitable spirit that defines the club doesn't fade behind bars. For some, like Lisa, it only grows stronger and more dangerous, adapting to new environments, just as Angie Anarchy Anderson thrived in chaos on the streets. Number 7. Angie Anarchy Anderson. Born in the gritty industrial city of Detroit, Angie Anderson's life was defined by chaos from the very beginning. Growing up amid the city's decline, with factories closing and neighborhoods deteriorating, she witnessed firsthand how quickly order could dissolve into disorder. Unlike most people who seek stability in uncertain times, Angie found something appealing in the chaos. A strange freedom that could only exist when rules ceased to matter. From her earliest years, Angie exhibited a rebellious streak that both worried and exhausted her parents. She wasn't just acting out, she seemed to genuinely thrive in situations where others would crumble. This unusual characteristic made her something of an outcast in normal society, but prepared her perfectly for life with the Hells Angels. Angie found her way to the notorious motorcycle club through a series of increasingly chaotic events in her young adult life. While others joined for brotherhood or protection, Angie was drawn to the Hells Angels precisely because they represented a rejection of society's norms. In a world that demanded order and conformity, the club offered her the freedom to embrace her true nature. What truly set Angie apart from other female Hells Angels was her absolute love for disorder. While many members certainly enjoyed breaking rules, most still craved some form of structure within the club itself. Not Angie. She found freedom only in the complete absence of rules. This mindset earned her the fitting nickname Anarchy, perfectly capturing her ability to thrive amid disorder and confusion. Unlike most club members who valued the brotherhood and togetherness of the Hells Angels, Angie was fundamentally a loner. She rarely associated with other members outside of necessary club business, preferring to ride solo and handle her affairs without interference. The only exception came during confrontations with rival gangs. Then, Angie would suddenly appear, ready for battle and seemingly energized by the pending conflict. In these confrontations, Angie earned her reputation as the club's most unpredictable weapon. Rival gangs learned to fear her not because she was the strongest or most skilled fighter, but because her actions were completely unpredictable. She might employ elaborate strategies or charge in recklessly. She might use weapons or her bare hands. She might attack the strongest opponent or target the weakest links. This unpredictability made her impossible to prepare for and therefore extremely dangerous. Law enforcement agencies felt the full impact of Angie's chaotic nature as well. Traditional policing relies on predicting criminal behavior and identifying patterns, techniques that proved utterly useless against someone who intentionally avoided patterns. Angie's random movements, constantly changing hideouts, and unpredictable activities made her nearly impossible to track or capture. Despite her preference for solitude, Angie remained fiercely loyal to the Hells Angels in her own way. She understood that the club provided the perfect environment for her to express her true nature. In return, she became their agent of chaos, unleashed whenever needed to confuse and destabilize enemies. Riding her powerful motorcycle through the streets of Detroit and beyond, Angie embodied the untamed essence of the Hells Angels. Her bike, like the woman herself, was a manifestation of controlled chaos. While most Hells Angels took pride in their meticulously maintained motorcycles, Angie's bike was a patchwork of parts, modifications, and repairs that somehow worked together despite looking like it might fall apart at any moment. Like its rider, the motorcycle seemed to defy conventional wisdom about what should and shouldn't work. As her reputation grew, Angie Anarchy Anderson became something of a legend, not just within the Hells Angels, but in the broader outlaw motorcycle world. Stories of her exploits, some true, many exaggerated, spread through clubhouses across the country. She became a symbol of the ultimate freedom that many bikers claimed to seek, but few truly embraced. Freedom not just from society's rules, but from all rules whatsoever. In a world where even outlaws follow certain codes, Angie represented something both fascinating and terrifying: the complete rejection of order in favor of pure, unbridled chaos. This made her not just dangerous to the club's enemies, but sometimes unpredictable even to her brothers and sisters in the Hells Angels. Angie embodied the raw chaos that could exist within the Hells Angels. Our final dangerous female member channeled her rebellious energy in a more focused direction. Where Angie was pure disorder, Fiona Firebrand Fitzpatrick used the power of words and ideology to ignite revolution. Number 6. Fiona Firebrand Fitzpatrick. The Windy City of Chicago gave birth to one of the Hells Angels' most influential female members. From her earliest years, Fiona Fitzpatrick showed an unwavering determination that set her apart from her siblings and peers. Unlike Angie's love of chaos or Molly's physical courage, Fiona's power lay in her mind and voice, tools that would eventually make her one of the most dangerous women in the Hells Angels hierarchy. As she grew older, this determination evolved into something more potent, a passionate spirit of rebellion against anything that tried to contain or control her. Fiona refused to conform to society's expectations of what a young woman should be. Instead, she chose to carve her own path through life, becoming a powerful symbol of individuality and courage to those around her. There was something magnetic about Fiona, an unusual aura that commanded attention whenever she entered a room. She possessed a presence that didn't settle for less than what she believed she deserved, drawing others to her cause almost effortlessly. This natural charisma would later become one of her most powerful weapons within the Hells Angels. Like many members of the notorious Motorcycle Club, Fiona's journey to the Hells Angels began with a love of motorcycles. However, while most were attracted to the speed or mechanical aspects, Fiona fell in love with what motorcycles represented: freedom, independence, and rebellion against conventional society. This symbolic connection to riding made her approach to the Hells Angels more philosophical than many other members. When Fiona first joined the Hells Angels, she did so slowly but deliberately, carefully finding her place within the organization. She fearlessly rode alongside male members, deliberately challenging the norms and expectations of the motorcycle world. Her very presence was enough to inspire awe and admiration from those who witnessed her determination to succeed in this masculine environment. What truly distinguished Fiona within the club wasn't physical strength or riding skills, though she possessed both in abundance. Her true power lay in her words. With fiery speeches that could stir the emotions of even the most hardened bikers, Fiona became the voice of rebellion within the club. She articulated the feelings and frustrations that many members felt but couldn't express, giving shape to the vague sense of dissatisfaction with society that drove many to join the Hells Angels in the first place. This remarkable ability to inspire through words earned her the nickname Firebrand, a perfect description of how her passionate calls for rebellion ignited sparks within the hearts of her fellow members. Her speeches could transform a room full of individual bikers into a unified force with a shared purpose and direction. This made her an indispensable member of the club, someone who could rally others when morale was low or resolve was wavering. But Fiona's firebrand nature extended far beyond her powerful speeches. She was a woman of action who put her words into practice, often leading rallies and protests against forces that threatened the Hells Angels' way of life. Her leadership style was uncommon but remarkably effective. She led with passion rather than intimidation, inspiring her fellow angels to fight not just with their fists, but with their convictions. One of Fiona's most remarkable achievements came during a citywide crackdown on motorcycle gangs in 2013. Following a report from the National Gang Intelligence Center that identified outlaw motorcycle gangs as substantial threats, authorities launched an aggressive campaign to curtail the activities of groups like the Hells Angels. Most clubs retreated or went underground during this period, but not Fiona. Instead, Firebrand Fitzpatrick organized and led a series of protests and rallies that publicly challenged the crackdown policy. With carefully planned demonstrations that highlighted what she saw as discriminatory treatment of motorcycle enthusiasts, Fiona managed to shift public opinion and put pressure on officials. The protests were intense and carried such a powerful message that authorities eventually eased their aggressive stance. This victory came at a personal cost, however. Fiona's high-profile activities made her a primary target for law enforcement. She found herself constantly in their crosshairs, subject to surveillance, harassment, and attempts to build cases against her. Yet despite this pressure, Fiona remained strong and determined, continuing her fight for what she believed was the Hells Angels' right to exist and ride freely. Fiona Firebrand Fitzpatrick demonstrated that true power doesn't always come from physical strength or violence. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon is a voice that can inspire others to action. Our next dangerous female Hells Angel took a completely different approach to earning her place in the Brotherhood. Where Rosie relied on her fists and fury, our next member, Lena Lethal Lawson, used her mind and mechanical prowess to become indispensable to the club. Number 5. Lena Lethal Lawson. Against the icy backdrop of Alaska, where danger lurks beneath the snow-capped peaks, a different kind of threat emerged in the form of Lena Lethal Lawson. Lena's power came from her extraordinary technical skills and cold, calculating approach to both machines and conflict. Even before Lena knew what riding a motorcycle meant, she displayed a natural talent for understanding how machines worked. As a child, she could take apart complex mechanisms and reassemble them, often improving their performance in the process. This mechanical curiosity blossomed into full-blown expertise by her teenage years. She could diagnose engine problems just by listening to them, rebuild transmissions blindfolded, and modify bikes to perform far beyond their factory specifications. Her mechanical mastery was unparalleled, making her a perfect fit for the Hells Angels. In a world where your motorcycle is your lifeline, someone with Lena's skills was invaluable. She could keep the club's bikes running in peak condition, making necessary repairs and performance-enhancing modifications that gave Hells Angels members an edge over rival gangs and law enforcement during pursuits. However, Lena's relevance to the club extended far beyond her technical abilities. She earned the nickname Lethal, not just because of her skill with machines, but because of her efficiency in dealing with threats. Behind her quiet demeanor and technical mind was a woman who could handle violence with chilling precision. She approached conflict with the same methodical attention to detail that she applied to engines, identifying weaknesses, calculating the optimal approach, and executing with deadly accuracy. Though Lena preferred to prevent conflicts whenever possible, often serving as a voice of reason and working towards peaceful solutions with rival gangs, she never shied away when violence became necessary. On multiple occasions, she detected and averted enemy ambushes, using her analytical mind to spot patterns and inconsistencies that others missed. When rival gangs thought they had the upper hand, Lena turned the tables, demonstrating both her strategic thinking and unbreakable resolve. With these exceptional abilities, Lena became a respected figure within the Hells Angels at a time when the club was almost exclusively male. In a brotherhood where men ruled supreme, she carved out her own essential role through sheer competence and cold efficiency. Men who might have dismissed other women based on gender alone knew better than to underestimate Lena Lethal Lawson. Her value to the club was simply too great. Like other high-ranking members of the Hells Angels, Lena's reputation didn't come without controversy. Her lethal efficiency and combat skills made her a primary target for law enforcement agencies across multiple states. She faced constant surveillance and appeared on numerous wanted lists throughout her time with the club. Despite this intense scrutiny, she lived fearlessly on the edge of legality, making it nearly impossible for authorities to build a solid case against her. Her mechanical skills weren't just useful for enhancing motorcycles, they also helped her develop ingenious ways to evade capture. She created hidden compartments in bikes to transport contraband, designed communication systems that couldn't be traced by police, and built mechanical diversions to throw off pursuing officers. These innovations made Lena not just dangerous on her own, but a force multiplier who enhanced the effectiveness and security of the entire club. Beyond her practical contributions, Lena became a powerful voice for women in the Hells Angels. She refused to be limited by traditional gender roles, demonstrating that women could be just as valuable to the club as men, sometimes even more so. Her presence challenged the status quo and paved the way for other women with unique skills to find their place in the Brotherhood. In the harsh Alaskan winter or the heat of battle, Lena Lethal Lawson remained cool and calculated. Her hands could bring engines to life or bring opponents to their knees with equal skill. She was living proof that true danger doesn't always announce itself with loud words or explosive displays. Sometimes it's the quiet, thinking ones you need to watch out for. While Lena used her mechanical genius and tactical mind to navigate the dangerous waters of the Hells Angels, our next dangerous female member took yet another approach to earning her place in the club's history. Where Lena was cool and calculated, Molly Mad Dog McDougal was wild and unpredictable, a force of nature that even the most hardened Hells Angels learned to respect. Number 4. Molly Mad Dog McDougal. The rolling hills and rugged terrain of rural Georgia shaped Molly McDougal into a woman as untamed as the land itself. Growing up on the outskirts of civilization, Molly developed a fearless spirit that set her apart from others her age. Unlike Lena's technical upbringing or Sandy's immersion in biker culture, Molly's childhood was defined by hard physical labor and the harsh realities of rural poverty. From a tender age, Molly was no stranger to hard work, helping her family tend to the fields and care for the animals on their small farm. The challenges of rural life toughened her up, molding her into a resilient and physically strong young woman with hands calloused from work and a spirit that refused to bend regardless of the challenge. She learned to face adversity head-on, never backing down regardless of the odds stacked against her. As she grew older, Molly's fearlessness manifested in unexpected ways. She found herself drawn to the thrill of the open road and the freedom that came with riding a motorcycle. The first time she felt the rumble of an engine beneath her and the wind whipping through her hair, she knew she'd found her calling. Riding wasn't just a hobby for Molly, it was liberation, a way to escape the confines of her rural upbringing and experience the world on her own terms. This passion for the open road and rejection of limitations eventually led her to the Hells Angels, where her unique combination of physical strength, courage, and riding skills would be put to the ultimate test. Joining wasn't easy for a woman from rural Georgia with no connections to the club, but Molly's determination knew no limits. Her willingness to take risks that others wouldn't even consider quickly earned her attention within the Brotherhood. What truly set Molly apart wasn't just her passion for riding or her country strength, it was her absolute fearlessness that bordered on recklessness. She pushed boundaries that even seasoned male riders wouldn't dare, taking her bike to speeds and over terrain that made veteran Hells Angels hold their breath. This made her not just respected, but feared, a force to be reckoned with, and one of the most dangerous female members of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. Molly's encounters with danger weren't limited to risky riding. Her strength and resolve were tested repeatedly through conflicts with rival gangs and law enforcement. Yet in every situation, she faced challenges with unwavering determination, refusing to be held back by fear or doubt. In a world where hesitation could mean death, Molly's instinct to charge ahead rather than retreat made her both valuable and terrifying to her enemies. The turning point in Molly's reputation came during what club members still refer to as her one-woman war with a local gang that had been causing trouble for the Hells Angels. After weeks of provocations and territory disputes, Molly grew tired of the back-and-forth threatening. Instead of waiting for a club decision on how to handle the situation, she took matters into her own hands. Tired of the constant provocations, she rode directly into the rival gang's camp alone, an act most would consider suicide. What happened next became the stuff of legend in the Hells Angels. Single-handedly, Molly brought down the entire local gang in a display of brutal force that shocked even her fellow club members. Witnesses described her as fighting like a woman possessed, taking on multiple opponents without hesitation or mercy. This incredible show of strength and savagery earned her the nickname Mad Dog, a title she wore with pride from that day forward. Despite this newfound respect, Molly continued to face hardships and doubt from those who questioned her place within the Hells Angels. The motorcycle world was still largely dominated by men, and some resented her rising status within the club. Yet time and again, she proved that her bravery and determination knew no bounds, silencing critics with her actions rather than words. Her brutal efficiency in dealing with threats naturally drew the attention of law enforcement. Agencies across multiple states had thick files on her activities, Yet somehow Molly managed to stay one step ahead of the law. Her intimate knowledge of the back roads and countryside, combined with her unpredictable nature, made her nearly impossible to track or capture. When police thought they had her cornered, she would find escape routes others wouldn't even notice, disappearing into the landscape she knew better than anyone else. What made Molly truly dangerous wasn't just her willingness to engage in violence, it was her unpredictability. No one, not even her closest allies, could ever be certain what she might do next. This unpredictable nature made her both a valuable asset and a wild card within the Hells Angels. When Molly Mad Dog McDougal showed up, chaos usually followed. Molly Mad Dog McDougal earned her reputation through fearless confrontations and wild unpredictability. Our next dangerous female Hells Angel, Brenda Breakneck Brooks, found her power through a different kind of speed, the kind that left both law enforcement and rival gangs eating her dust. Number 3. Brenda Breakneck Brooks. In the sun-soaked highways of California, where street racing culture thrived alongside outlaw motorcycle gangs, Brenda Breakneck Brooks blazed trails that few men dared to follow. While Molly found her strength in direct confrontation, Brenda's danger came from her supernatural abilities behind the handlebars of a motorcycle, a skill that made her both legendary and lethal. Violence wasn't the only quality valued by the Hells Angels. Speed and riding skills carried equal weight in the Brotherhood. Brenda was born into this world, the daughter of Henry Brooks, one of the most respected riders in Hells Angels history. Known for his unmatched speed and precision on a motorcycle, Henry introduced his daughter to bikes before she could even walk. "My earliest memory is sitting in front of my dad on his Harley," Brenda once told a club member. "I could feel the engine vibrating through my whole body. I was hooked before I even knew what addiction meant." Growing up in California, Brenda spent countless hours watching her father race, absorbing his techniques and developing an unquenchable thirst for speed. While other girls her age were learning about makeup and boys, Brenda was learning about engine timing and weight distribution on turns. By the time she was 12, she could already handle a motorcycle better than most adults. As she grew older, her natural talent blossomed into something extraordinary. Many expected her to follow in her father's footsteps, but few anticipated that she would surpass his legacy. Her speed was unnatural, her precision nearly perfect. She seemed to become one with her motorcycle, pushing machines beyond what their manufacturers thought possible. "When Brenda rides, it's like watching someone defy physics," a fellow Hells Angel once remarked. "She takes corners at speeds that should send her flying, but somehow she makes it look easy." Her nickname Breakneck wasn't given lightly. It referred not only to her reckless speed, but to the fate that often awaited those foolish enough to challenge her to a race. She rode with such abandoned ferocity that even veteran bikers would shake their heads in disbelief. The Hells Angels quickly recognized her value, particularly during high-speed confrontations with rival gangs or escapes from law enforcement. One of Brenda's most legendary moments came after a rival gang member infiltrated a Hells Angels gathering and stole a prized motorcycle. Despite the thief having a 10-minute head start, Brenda calmly got on her bike and promised to retrieve it. What happened next became the stuff of Hells Angels legend. Racing at speeds approaching 150 miles per hour, weaving through traffic as if it was standing still, Brenda caught up with the thief in less than 15 minutes. Witnesses on the highway described seeing nothing but a blur as she passed. When she finally cornered the thief, her riding skills proved equally valuable in the ensuing confrontation. Using her motorcycle as a weapon, she literally ran the man down, retrieving the stolen bike without firing a shot. This incident cemented her reputation within the club. She wasn't just a woman who could ride, she was a weapon on wheels, capable of turning a motorcycle into an extension of herself. The Hells Angels leadership recognized her abilities and often deployed her for missions requiring speed, precision, and nerves of steel. With Brenda, it wasn't about being a woman in a man's world, a former club member explained. It was about being the best rider, period. Gender stopped mattering when people saw what she could do on a bike. Her extraordinary abilities naturally drew the attention of law enforcement. Highway patrol units across the state knew her by name, but catching her proved nearly impossible. Brenda's intimate knowledge of California's road systems, combined with her supernatural riding abilities, meant that police pursuits usually ended with frustrated officers watching her disappear in the distance. "We had a standing order not to chase Brooks after a certain point," one retired officer admitted. "Too many crashes, too many officers injured trying to keep up. She was just too damn fast." Despite her value to the club, Brenda's life wasn't without challenges. Her addiction to speed extended beyond just motorcycle riding. She lived her entire life in the fast lane, making quick decisions and taking risks that often bordered on suicidal. This approach earned her respect within the Hells Angels, but also put her at constant risk. What made Brenda truly dangerous wasn't just her riding skills, but her complete disregard for personal safety or consequences. When she got on a motorcycle, the concept of limits ceased to exist. This made her unpredictable and impossible to intimidate, qualities that served her well in the dangerous world of outlaw motorcycle gangs. To Brenda "Breakneck" Brooks, the Hells Angels weren't just a club. They were a platform for her to push the boundaries of what was possible on two wheels. Her legacy within the organization wasn't built on violence or intimidation, but on a skill so refined it bordered on artistry. While Brenda built her fearsome reputation through supernatural speed and riding skills, our next dangerous female Hells Angel channeled her rebellious energy into becoming a force of nature that could tear through both rival gangs and law enforcement like her namesake, a tornado that left nothing but destruction in its wake. Number 2. Tara "Tornado" Thompson. The vast plains of Texas have always bred individuals as wild and untamed as the landscape itself. But few embodied this spirit quite like Tara "Tornado" Thompson. Where Brenda "Breakneck" Brooks was precision and speed, Tara was pure destructive force, unstoppable, unpredictable, and capable of leaving entire rival gangs in shambles. Raised by her grandparents in the Lone Star State after her parents abandoned her at a young age, Tara learned self-reliance and independence from the start. The harsh realities of her childhood forged her into someone who approached life's challenges head-on, never backing down regardless of the odds. This confrontational approach would later become her trademark within the Hells Angels. Tara didn't know how to back down, one former club member recalled. Even as a prospect, when most people are trying to keep their heads down and follow orders, she was questioning everything, challenging everyone. Most people thought she wouldn't last a week, but that fire in her is exactly what made her valuable. Her journey to the Hells Angels wasn't straightforward. Unlike Brenda, who was born into the culture, or Molly, who sought it out, Tara's path was more chaotic. A series of increasingly serious run-ins with local law enforcement in her late teens led to connections with outlaw bikers who recognized the untamed spirit within her. They saw something valuable in her refusal to be controlled, a natural fit for the Hells Angels philosophy. What truly distinguished Tara from other female members wasn't just her rebellious nature, but her almost supernatural ability to create and thrive in chaos. Like her namesake, she moved through life like a force of nature, leaving destruction and confusion in her wake. This quality earned her the nickname Tornado early in her Hells Angels career, a perfect description of her effect on both the club and its enemies. "When Tara enters a situation, everything changes," explained a longtime Hells Angel. "It's like watching a storm system move in. The pressure shifts, everyone gets tense, and then all hell breaks loose. But somehow she's always at the center, perfectly calm while everything around her is chaos." This ability to function in the eye of the storm made Tara particularly effective during confrontations with rival gangs. While other members might be rattled by violence or unexpected developments, Tara seemed to gain focus and clarity when situations deteriorated. This unnatural composure during chaos made her both valuable in conflict and deeply unsettling to those who witnessed it. One of Tara's most legendary moments came during a territorial dispute with a rival gang that had been escalating for months. What should have been a simple meeting to negotiate boundaries quickly spiraled into a violent confrontation when the rivals arrived with unexpected numbers and weapons. Many Hells Angels were caught off guard, but not Tara. According to witnesses, she seemed to anticipate the double cross, having positioned herself perfectly to turn the ambush back on its perpetrators. Leading a seemingly hopeless counterattack, Tara displayed not just courage, but a bizarre tactical genius that emerged only in moments of extreme danger. She guided her fellow Hell's Angels through the chaotic situation, turning what should have been a devastating defeat into a decisive victory. Her strategic prowess in the heat of battle secured her reputation as one of the club's most valuable assets. She sees things differently when everything goes to hell, one club member explained. Like the chaos clears her mind instead of clouding it. Most people freeze up or panic, but Tara, she just gets better. This unique ability made her particularly dangerous to law enforcement as well. Traditional police tactics proved ineffective against someone who thrived in disorder. Attempts to corner or capture Tara typically resulted in unpredictable responses that officers weren't prepared for. Like her namesake, she was impossible to contain or predict, changing direction without warning and leaving authorities disoriented in her wake. Despite her value to the club, Tara's stormy temperament and constant need for conflict created internal challenges as well. She frequently clashed with club leadership, challenging decisions and pushing boundaries that even the Hell's Angels considered sacred. Yet her unquestionable loyalty and effectiveness in crisis situations made her too valuable to lose, despite the friction she sometimes caused. Tara was like keeping a wild animal as a pet, one former club officer admitted. Dangerous as hell and might turn on you at any moment, but when you needed that ferocity, nothing else would do. What made Tara Tornado Thompson truly dangerous wasn't just her comfort with violence or her strategic mind, it was her complete unpredictability. Like the weather phenomenon she was named for, she could appear suddenly, cause tremendous damage, and disappear just as quickly. This made her impossible to prepare for, and therefore particularly feared by rivals and law enforcement alike. To Tara, the Hell's Angels represented the perfect environment for her chaotic nature. The club's existing reputation for danger and unpredictability gave her a platform to express her true self without constraint. In return, she became one of their most effective weapons, a human tornado that could be pointed at enemies when conventional approaches failed. Tara Tornado Thompson was known for leaving destruction in her wake on the outside. Behind prison walls, another woman, Marie Antoinette Bugaj, would establish a reign of terror that made even hardened criminals tremble at the mere mention of her name. Number 1. Marie Antoinette Bugaj. Within the stark confines of the Women's Correctional Facility in New Brunswick, few stories capture the complex reality of female associates of outlaw motorcycle clubs like that of Marie Antoinette Bugaj. Unlike the stereotypical portrayal of women in motorcycle club culture, Bugaj carved out a position of significance within the organization through her intelligence and connections, rather than through violence or intimidation. Before her incarceration, Bugaj moved within the influential circles of the Hells Angels MC Nomads New Brunswick chapter, establishing herself as more than just a peripheral figure. Standing as the secretary of the Atlantic Confederation of Clubs and Independents, she worked within an organization that publicly fought against what they termed biker discrimination and profiling, while advocating for motorcyclists' rights across the Atlantic provinces. Her professional life showed no obvious connections to criminal activity. In August 2022, she had registered a business called Elysium Massage Therapy on Queen Street, presenting a legitimate facade to the community. This duality, operating a registered business while maintaining close ties to the motorcycle club world, demonstrated the complex nature of her involvement in these circles. Her downfall began on August 24th, when law enforcement executed a search warrant at her Aberdeen Street residence. The raid uncovered cocaine, drug paraphernalia, and a taser, evidence that would eventually lead to charges of possession of cocaine for the purpose of trafficking and possession of a prohibited weapon. Released initially, Bugaj found herself arrested again when police seized a substantial amount of cash, suggesting deeper involvement in trafficking operations. Behind bars, Bugaj's connection to the motorcycle club world became even more apparent. Her relationship with Robin Moulton, a full-patch member of the Hells Angels MC Nomads New Brunswick chapter, was no secret. Their bond had been publicly displayed on social media, with Bugaj posting intimate photos and expressing support for Moulton after his own arrest on similar charges. What makes Bugai's case particularly interesting among female associates of outlaw motorcycle clubs is her official position within the club-adjacent organization. As secretary of the Atlantic Confederation of Clubs and Independents, she held a formal title in an organization that positioned itself as fighting discrimination against bikers, claiming that law enforcement relied on assumptions, opinions, and stories from the past, rather than facts and evidence. Her case represents part of a broader pattern in how women navigate positions of influence within male-dominated outlaw motorcycle club culture. Rather than adopting the stereotypical roles often depicted in media, women like Bugai frequently wield influence through organizational skills, business connections, and strategic positioning within club-adjacent structures. The joint force investigation that caught Bugai in its net was specifically targeting outlaw motorcycle gangs in the province, highlighting the increasing focus of law enforcement on breaking up these networks. Her arrest came as part of a coordinated effort involving multiple agencies, including the RCMP, Canadian Border Services Agency, and various police forces throughout New Brunswick. As Bugai serves her 30-month sentence following her guilty plea, her case adds another dimension to the understanding of how women operate within outlaw motorcycle club structures. Her story demonstrates that female involvement extends beyond the stereotypical roles often portrayed in popular culture, with women sometimes occupying positions of organizational importance and maintaining connections that facilitate the continued operation of these groups, even when key male members face legal troubles. In the hierarchy of women associated with outlaw motorcycle clubs who find themselves incarcerated, Bugai represents those who maintained legitimate business interests and organizational roles while allegedly participating in the criminal activities that often surround these groups. Her story reveals the complex reality of women's involvement in these organizations. Less sensationalized than fiction would suggest, but no less significant in understanding how these groups operate and endure despite intense law enforcement scrutiny.